Call in will allow a half an hour before we start the meeting. But I need to see 100% compliance with the mask mandate, please, or I will adjourn. We will adjourn the meeting now, and we will, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to suspend the meeting, and we'll move to a virtual location. We can't put everyone at risk. Thank you. October 26, 2021 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tab. The meeting is being streamed on live on PPS TV, Services website, and on Channel 28, and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. As of August 13th, Governor Kate Brown reinstated a statewide indoor mask requirement for all indoor public settings, whether vaccinated or not, in order to stop the highly contagious COVID Delta variant from spreading further. Tonight, we have in place mitigation strategies to help keep us safe, including meeting virtually.
So we can hear people side talking in the background. Michelle, while you're talking, the microphone in the room is picking up lots of other noises. So just be mindful if you're in that, that we can hear lots of people. So walking around, papers rustling, that kind of thing.
Nobody wants to talk?
Nobody's talking.
Okay. I'm not sure where the sound is coming from, but we'll investigate. Good evening. I want to welcome the board, superintendent, staff, families, students, and guests. We're going to go through the consent agenda. The board will vote on the consent agenda. Board members, if there are any items you'd like to pull for discussion, you will set those aside for discussion and vote at the end of the meeting. Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
Board members, are there any items you'd like to pull from the consent agenda? Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Director Constam moves and Director Brim Edwards seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there any board discussion? Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
The board will now vote on resolutions 6385 through 6388 and 6383 through 6384. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg unofficially voting
Yes.
Chair pass. Can I please get clarification on which resolution numbers we just voted on? I have the consent agenda at 6385 through 6388, but it sounded like we had a couple extra numbers on there, so I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Yes, it's a mistake in my script. It is, the correct resolutions are 6385 through 6388. Thank you for catching that. We now turn to student and public comment.
Chair DePass, do you want to vote again on the correct?
Okay.
Just to make sure.
I'll
Move the revised agenda with the correct numbers.
Okay, so we'll move the,
I'm sorry, that was a motion I wasn't telling you what to do.
thank you. So I don't need a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda.
You have a motion.
Revised
A
one.
motion, okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Director Brim Constam moves and Director Constam seconds the motion to approve resolutions 6385 through 6388. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes or aye.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All opposed indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved again by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg voting.
Yes.
Thank you, Kara. We now turn to student and public comment. Before we begin, I'd like to review our guidelines for public comment. First, the board thanks you for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments. Public input informs and includes our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen. To that end, I would ask each of you to tuck your phone away during testimony so we can give our full attention to the people in front of us. Our board office may follow up on board-related issues raised during public testimony. We request that complaints about individual employees please be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. And if you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you mail them to publiccomment, all one word, at pps.net. That's publiccomment@pps.net. Please make sure when you begin your comment, you clearly state your name and spell your last name. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll hear a sound after 3 minutes, which means it's time for you to conclude your comments. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone signed up for student or public comment?
We do. Actually, I did not move the student in first. We've got Lily Stewart, and she's on her way in.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lily Stewart, Stewart. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior at Grant High School. Today, a few hundred students joined me in walking out of our school during our 6th period class. We joined in front of the school for 15 minutes to express our support of a vaccine mandate for students ages 12 and up in the district. That specifically, we support option B being presented tonight, which would require vaccination against COVID-19 for all students ages 12 and up attending PPS schools in person. And of note, this provision also allows for medical, religious, and philosophical exemptions. Me and other students have reviewed news articles, Supreme Court cases, and recent notes from board listening sessions. And based on our review and the fact that the school board has not collected any numerical data from students, we determined that using our bodies as votes would be an effective and efficient way to show our support for this issue. We did not walk out to ditch 15 minutes of class, but instead to support a safe and personable environment for the rest of the school year. And though the crowd may have looked large, that's the reality of our hallways and our classrooms. At present, it simply isn't possible to remain physically distant in many of our classes. In terms of reasons why I believe that the school district should strongly consider approving this mandate, the school district already, and the state of Oregon specifically, already requires that students be vaccinated. This is polio, varicella, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis A, and hepatitis B. COVID vaccines have been well researched. They have been fully approved. The Pfizer vaccine has been fully approved for people ages 16 and up nationwide, and today authorization was granted for children aged 5 to 11. And mandates in terms of legality, in terms of possibility, are established with significant legal precedent dating all the way back to 1905 in Jacobson v. Massachusetts. And in that ruling, it held that real liberty for all could not exist under the operation of a principle which recognizes the right of each individual person to use his own, whether in respect of his person or his property, regardless of the injury that may be done to others. And this means that when someone's personal liberty impacts the safety of others, it is no longer possible for people to be truly free. And in this case, we are presented with a vaccine that reduces severe illness by 95% and has the ability to keep individuals and others safe. This vaccine is safe, free, and effective, and getting it would protect the safety of other students. And in terms of why that's important, one of the biggest arguments against this is this idea that students with medical conditions that prevent them from being vaccinated would be excluded from school. I don't think that I don't support that, and I don't know other students that do. In fact, one of the most significant reasons for a vaccine mandate is that it would encourage herd immunity in our middle and high schools so that students who have conditions that prevent vaccination. Is that 3 minutes? Okay. Thank you.
That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Josh Himmel.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Josh, you are sideways, but we can totally hear you.
I'll rotate.
There we go.
Better?
Yes.
Perfect.
My name's Josh Emel, spelled Himel. I have 2 kids in PPS. I like vaccines. I have a ton of them on board, and I'm really grateful for the COVID vaccines. I'm not opposed to vaccine mandates in school, but I'm totally against the proposed mandate at this time, and here's why. 1, vaccinating healthy kids in the hopes of helping those kids might do them more harm than good. Healthy school-age kids are at a very low risk of harm from COVID, so low that the rare risks of the vaccine in the near term may be worse for some. And then there are the unknown long-term risks. Some people are comfortable writing those off as zero, assuming that the experts are right when they say there are no surprises here. After over a year and a half of surprise after surprise, am I to believe that that one critical part of this catastrophe is going to go exactly as expected? No, I'm leaving some allowance for the possibility of long-term harm. And until we know the full risk-benefit analysis, we should have no mandate. 2, forced vaccination of kids in the hopes of helping adults can only be justified if we know we aren't harming those kids. Otherwise, we've got our morality upside down, putting kids at risk to protect adults when it is adults that should bear risk to protect kids. Until we know the vaccines won't harm kids, including over the long term, we have absolutely no business forcing them to get vaccinated to protect adults. 3, forced vaccination of kids in the hopes of avoiding school shutdowns is so far unnecessary. Schools opened at the height of the Delta variant spike and over 2 months have not shown an upward trend in student cases. 4, forced vaccination of some kids in the hopes of protecting other kids only makes sense if the marginal improvement in the other kids' safety is greater than the health risk and loss of autonomy faced by the kids vaccinated under the mandate. Given the already super low COVID risk faced by kids and lack of knowledge regarding vaccine long-term risk, such a trade-off is not justified. I'm asking each of you on the board, please vote no on this mandate at this time. As you consider it, remember that with authority comes responsibility. Are you all ready, technically, morally, and legally, for the responsibility and the consequences of making healthcare decisions for thousands of unwilling children? If you vote yes, you need to be ready. Thank you.
You.
Wow.
Thank you. We have Chris Reiser, who's on their way over.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Chris Reiser, R-I-S-E-R, he, him pronouns. I'm sick. I'm tired. And I'm waiting for my most recent COVID test result. You all said that all these guidelines and data and tracking protocols, policies that we agreed upon for hybrid in the fall were designed to get every single staff member and student safely back into the building. Teachers, the essential worker, aren't getting paid. Cafeteria ladies are being put on leave and replaced. School buses aren't running. Subs aren't showing up. Kids aren't masking up. Kids aren't social distancing. Black and brown kids and educators are still being pushed out though, and they're still lead in the water. PPS schools are not safe. They never have been, but they're certainly more dangerous now than ever. The only ones keeping this thing together are the teachers, paraeducators, custodians, food service workers, and bus drivers, everyday people who continue to show up under the worst working conditions we could ever have imagined 2 years ago. In reality, though, not one of us would be where we are today, including the folks who are in this boardroom, without the children who show up to legitimize the jobs that we perform. We have to remember who needs whom. And they aren't here for us or for school. They show up for each other. So let's cut the charade. You aren't the ones deserving of any promotions from chief to deputy or national accolades from people who don't know you or a single student in the district you profit from. You don't listen to the folks at the bottom with any attempt to understand, only to find ways to benefit. And if not that, you're trapped by the very logic that reproduces the same outcomes, so that at every point of decision, you privatize, digitize, and make trite, toothless statements on paper. PPS resolutions on Black lives, Latina or Latinx heritage, climate justice, LGBTQ plus folks, and so on, are so many dead trees that allow you to carry on harming staff and students with the policies you do enact. The work of serving children cannot be about mere representation, furthering political and/or corporate agendas, or self-aggrandizement. In this moment, as in every moment, but especially in this moment, we need to center each other. People. You say, together we will, a cleverly coded collective command. Well, already we have not. Some of us will get through. Others have already left or been pushed out. You'll just replace them with computers. I have no ask, because nothing any of us ever has to say matters unless and until it converges with the interests of the corporate, white supremacist, heteronormative patriarchy that drives all decisions in this space. If I had more time, I'd say more about conflicts of interest and $1.2 million camera scams, about unconscious participation in systemic exclusion, but I only have 3 minutes. Another way is possible. Another way is coming, where young people will find purpose and real actions that transform our relationship with the land, with each other, and with ourselves. I'm here for it. And Ms. Constam, please try to keep your mask on, because I understand that you're in a space with other people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Becca Ford.
Hello, thank you. My name is Becca Ford, F-O-R-D. I am a parent of a sweet, creative, neurodivergent ninth grader at MLC, and his dad is a PPS teacher at another school. I want to start off by saying that I empathize with having fear of SARS-CoV-2, fear of sickness, fear of death, and fear of inadvertently harming others. The media has been busy instilling these fears in all of us these last 20 months. And for the first year of the pandemic, I was very careful to follow all the protocols and had planned on taking one of the COVID vaccines. When the rollout began, I started investigating the data for myself and became concerned that these mRNA vaccines, though they have been researched for many years, had never before been used in humans. Then I discovered that the vaccine makers are immune from liability, and they either have a very checkered past or have never brought a vaccine to market. I want the pandemic to be over as much as you, but I do not believe mandating the vaccines is the answer. In my investigation, I also found information that relieved me of much of the fear of the virus. The infection survival rate for people under 70 ranges from 99.41% to 99.9973% in the under 20 age group. There are safe treatments that are effective when used early after onset of COVID symptoms, treatments that have been suppressed due to the agenda to vaccinate absolutely everyone. My fully vaxxed husband contracted COVID, passed it to myself and my child, and had a more severe case than the two of us. We all used early treatment options and were feeling better within a week. My child and I now have natural immunity, which has been shown by 81 scientific studies to be long-lasting and to be superior to the vaccines, even against the variants. These vaccines are also not as safe as corporate media tells us. The vaccine adverse events reporting system now shows 17,128 deaths after the COVID jabs in the US. There have been over 5,000 cases of myocarditis, heart inflammation causing permanent scarring post-vaccination in the 12 to 19-year-old age group. A large study in the UK and another that surveyed people internationally found that people with a history of SARS-CoV-2 infection experienced increased rates of side effects after vaccination. In fact, we are roughly 56% more likely to experience a side effect that requires hospital care. Former Pfizer executive Dr. Michael Yeadon has determined that kids are 50 times more likely to die from the COVID vax than from COVID. Due to this risk these shots pose to my child, I will be forced to homeschool if this mandate passes. You may be unaware that a formal petition for a federal grand jury investigation into both the CDC and FDA for data manipulation and fraud was jointly filed in August by Oregon State Senators Kim Thatcher and Dennis Linthicum. And now I'll close by saying you have heard and received in written form this data pointing to potential harm of COVID vaccinations to children. And now you carry the burden of that knowledge. Thank you very much.
Good job, girlfriend. Good job.
Desmond, oh, there you go.
Hi. I was prepared to share documents on my phone. I'm surprised that was just removed. Well, if I'm not allowed to share the documents, that's okay. I'll explain them verbally. Despite.
Glenn, do you mind stating your name, please?
My name is Desmond Bellard. My pronoun is child of God, if you need one. But as a child of God, I'm not allowed to promote fear. I am allowed to promote truth, though. And despite what anyone's opinion may be, the truth is the law is the law. And as a legislative body, delegated authority from the Constitution of Oregon, it is mandatory that you follow the Constitution of Oregon. Any act that you create that goes against the Constitution of Oregon is considered fraud, as the powers that which you have come from the Constitution of Oregon. And Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution of Oregon strictly states that no law can interfere with the rights of conscience. That includes the right of conscientious objection. If you look at ORS 431A.015, you will see the very situation we are in right now depicted as the public health director. Even if an epidemic was taking over multiple countries in the world and it required state and federal coordination, they still could not prescribe treatment or the use of prophylactic measures without respect to the conscientious objection. If you put a mandate that these children vaccinate themselves, you would be violating Article 1, Section 18 of the Constitution, which states that no property can be taken for public use unless it's been assessed and paid for. And because you are part of the state, and the property that I'm referring to is the interest in consent for treatment or prophylactic measures to natural born human offspring. See this child right here, my natural child, and it is my private property to consent to her treatments or use of prophylactic measures. It doesn't matter if she's aged like this one, 5-6 months, or if she was 17. She's age of majority in Oregon is 18. She's still a minor, which means the consent is my private property. It's not yours for public use, nor can you strip me of my right of conscientious objection for treatment. It is imperative that you follow the Constitution and support your oath. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Emily Schultz. I'm trying to move her over, but it's not giving me a little trouble. So just one second. Oh, there. It looks like she's coming.
Hi, can you see me?
Yeah. Yes.
My name is Emily Schultz. Last name is Schultz. I am a former PPS teacher and a parent of a second grader in a North Portland PPS school. I taught for 7 years in the Chicago public school system and was in my 4th with Portland Public Schools until I resigned this year. For too many years, the disrespect for our profession has grown. Our roles and responsibilities expand. Curriculums change constantly and resources are taken away without teacher input. Class sizes and student needs grow. We absorb and adjust to new initiatives and all that is piled into our already heaping plates. The workload is unmanageable, and teachers are continually asked to do more with less. Our unpaid overtime ensures that the system continues to run, all while making an average of 20% less than other career professionals with similar levels of education. The following fact was presented to me in professional development by PPS for the past 4 years. Teachers matter more to student achievement than any other aspect of schooling. In fact, the teacher alone has 2 to 3 times the effect of any other school factor, including services, facilities, and leadership. In my own experience with PPS, the actions of the district have not reflected this evidence-based fact. To reflect that fact, any and all funds possible should be funneled directly to the classroom and student-facing positions that lower class sizes and improve outcomes for students. Remember, teachers and teacher expertise matter. In fact, research shows that it matters more than any other factor. PPS, like many other districts in the nation, has reacted to an emergency situation by lowering qualifications to become a substitute. Like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, this stopgap measure won't fix the deeper problem. Again, teachers do matter. How will the board and PPS retain current educators and attract more? I never wanted to leave teaching. This has been what I wanted to do for my entire life. And at many points in my 11 years as an educator, the job brought me so much joy and purpose. I simply could no longer continue to function amidst such dysfunction. As a parent, it has become clearer and clearer to me that the emperor has no clothes. The district is in crisis. I am disturbed with the following. Schools opened with safety plans that didn't account for the Delta variant. We weren't given more options to keep our unvaccinated children safe. The wait list for the online learning academy remains untouched. Teachers are not getting adequate preparation time. Administrators are having to use their time to contact trace. Daily calls and texts reveal how dire the busing situation is. Standardized testing continues on the same way as it did pre-COVID. PPS is relying on parents to patch holes in the system. For example, being asked to provide snacks for 22 Title I schools after the fresh fruits and vegetables program was put on pause. PPS and the school board aren't talking about the glaring disparities in our system from neighborhood to neighborhood and even school to school. We had a chance to rethink education, and we ended up doing the same exact things, the exact same ways, and simply added masks. We can do better, and we should do better. How will the board respond? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That concludes who we have signed up for general public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Again, thank you all for your comments. Please feel free to connect with our senior board manager, Roseanne Powell, if you have something specifically you'd like to follow up with the board or office. We're going to move to student representatives report. Student Representative Weinberg, would you please provide your report?
Good evening, everyone. I first wanted to start off by saying just thank you for everyone who gave public comment, and thank you for everyone who registered for the vaccine town halls, including the student town hall, was it Thursday of last week? So thank you to everyone who shared their views. With talking with the DSC today, we wanted to just recognize and share that we don't feel like there was enough student engagement in that specific meeting or enough communication from the district about it, because we did see limited attendance and engagement in the session. The district student council is considering pushing forward a simple student survey just to gather more input from students on their opinions of the possible vaccine mandate for students to qualify. I'll let you guys know what we decide on that, but it looks like we're putting that together, and we'll let you know next week for our board meeting after that. When I asked students to kind of just give updates on their school, my own school, Cleveland High School, the district student council rep, shared that at our own school, a student decided to write the N-word on a pillar in the cafeteria that was very large and very prominent to many students as they walked into school. I think this speaks to how, as we return from COVID, there's still unaddressed racial trauma that we still need to address in schools and haven't successfully done so. Other students on the district student council reflected that they believe that their experiences with racism in schools has not improved or has not abated or decreased, but rather increased in severity and frequentness. I believe PPS has a pretty strong-ish policy on anti-racism and anti-oppression in our schools. I would love moving forward to see an administrative directive on how we implement those practices in our schools. Thank you so much.
Student Representative Weinberg.
Chair to pass, point of order. I'd like to just share with everybody that Jackson participated in a national panel this week at the Council of Great City Schools conference. And I think there were about, 8 to 10 school districts represented from around the country. And it was riveting, it was insightful, it was poignant, it was urgent in terms of all the work that we have to do and the reforms we need to make. And in fact, Jackson made a really incredible point about urgency, saying that student representatives only have 1 year on the board, whereas members in most elected members in most districts have 4 years. And so there's a greater sense of urgency to at least start the reforms that are needed. And it was just very well received, and I learned a lot and was very proud to be associated with you.
Thank you.
I understand that that was your idea to form a student council at the Council for Great City Schools. What would be your just initial assessment?
Yeah, so we meet the last Thursday of every month, so in 2 days we meet for our second time. I unfortunately don't think I'll be able to make it, but I think it's going really well. I think having that connection, being a student representative is in a sense a very isolating role within districts. We are typically one student on an adult board. So being able to connect across urban districts, we have similar experiences, similar goals, similar aspirations, being able to talk about our goals and also our strategies for how we push forward for our own personal agendas and the student agenda has been super helpful.
Thank you.
I think we'll be able to share a link from that. I haven't seen it yet, but when it comes out, make sure everybody gets it.
That would be great. We're going to go to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Guerrero, would you please provide the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Terry, for helping show a few slides here. Buenas tardes, everyone. This evening, I want to share a few important updates with you. Supporting our schools continues to be our main priority, and it has been an all-hands-deck approach. That includes all available central office staff and I continuing to be a regular presence across our schools. And being in schools is proving to be an important way to also hear directly from our students and staff as we navigate these challenging times. In addition to visiting schools during the school day, I've really enjoyed also taking the chance to see our students in action during extracurricular activities in the evenings. This includes recent soccer and football games. Thank you, Senior Director of Athletics Marshall Haskins, for accompanying me. Just a shout out, I want to appreciate all the ways that our coaches, band directors, and other school staff continue to create spaces for our students to experience joy. I'm also looking forward to attending some high school plays on my calendar in the coming weeks. Terry, the next slide, please. I just want to also pile on a bit of pride Director Constam just mentioned. Last week, many of our directors and I had the opportunity to attend the virtual fall conference of the Council of Great City Schools, which, as you know, is made up of 75 of the largest school districts in the country. This is our annual gathering of school districts where district leaders and elected school board members gather to learn best practices and the latest innovations with one another. And you should know Portland Public Schools was well represented at the 65th annual fall conference. We had numerous staff presenting on a variety of topics that included our pathways to school leadership, aimed at advancing our school system's efforts at workforce diversity and development, and other aspects of our vision and our district strategic plan. We had other teams of staff present about how the district is advancing elements of our graduate profile through our STEM initiatives. And we even had former PPS staff presenting a panel on equity-driven work in urban school districts. So just want to thank staff who represented capably work in our district with our colleagues across the country. And I also wanted to mention, every year, the Council of Great City Schools has really prioritized bringing together a group of representative students to discuss issues impacting our students' experience. I'm also proud that our very own Jackson Weinberg participated in this year's National Town Hall titled Amplifying the Voice of Students, From Critical Conversations to Concrete Actions, which featured student board representatives from across the country discussing how they work to bring student voice to the Board of Education in their respective school districts. So thank you, Jackson, for representing us so capably. And if anybody's interested, I have all the video clips. Next slide, Terry. Directors, as you're aware, the state and the district's deadline for all school employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19 was last week. As the media well reported, I'm happy to share that this requirement has had a generally minimal impact in PPS classrooms and campuses. Of the nearly 7,500 PPS staff, over 96% indicated being fully vaccinated. We have an additional 1.3% on their way to being fully vaccinated. I'm incredibly pleased and proud that the vast majority of Portland Public Schools employees have in fact been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So I'll take this as a sign not only of their dedication to keep our students and colleagues protected, but also signifies a common understanding that vaccination is the best possible protection against this deadly virus. A small fraction of our employees were placed on unpaid leave and will be unable to return to work while PPS Human Resources processes their non-disciplinary termination. This included 4 classroom teachers, 5 paraeducators, 10 custodians, 6 nutrition staff, and 3 student transportation drivers. Next slide. I also want to provide a few back to school additional highlights. First, I want to thank our community for their continued patience as we work through this bus driver shortage. Please know our team is continuing to explore every option, big and small, to provide best possible service to our students and families during this challenging time. I'm happy to share with you that next week we'll have 8 brand new bus drivers beginning full-time, with an additional 11 bus drivers beginning the following week that are in the training cycle. So that'll bring down our still significant bus driver vacancy to about 70. We're also glad to share that we invited 125 additional students across all K-12 schools to enroll in our online learning academy. I want to share my appreciation to the OLA team, who I had a chance to visit with virtually just a few weeks ago, for continuing to expand accessibility to our virtual program. And lastly, as we all know, we're seeing global supply chain disruption impacting all industries. Public education is not immune. It's impacting aspects of our work as well in operations. We're starting to see some of these early impacts. I know that our team continues to adapt and work through these challenges. Thank you for your support and patience as we work to procure important resources that keep our school system going. And then last slide, Terry. Before I conclude my remarks, I want to welcome and invite a well-regarded leader in Dr. Renard Adams, who is serving as our new Chief of Research, Assessment, and Accountability. Dr. Adams, to tell you a little bit about him, comes to PPS from Baltimore County Public Schools, where he served in a variety of leadership roles. Dr. Adams is born and raised in Baltimore. He gravitated initially towards art and earned a bachelor's degree in art from Morehouse College. In this new cabinet level role, Dr. Adams will continue to build on this team's critical role in the implementation of assessments to inform instruction, ongoing research and evaluation studies, and preparation of data analysis to drive our continuous improvement activities as a school district. So welcome, Dr. Adams, who per tradition is here in person, virtually this evening, to share a few words of introduction. Bernard?
Thank you for that great introduction, Superintendent Guerrero. Good evening, Madam Chair and members, directors of the board. I'm so very pleased to be here and be a part of the PPS team. One of the things that Guadalupe didn't mention was that I started my career as an aide in a special needs classroom and then went on to become a special education teacher. And so I'd like to tell people that I'm a teacher first and a data nerd second, but those two heartstrings are very equal with me. And so I hope that as we work together, you find that my presentations are effective, our conversations are teaching conversations, and that we can truly work together to bring about the realization of the graduate portrait. Thank you, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome, Dr. Adams. With that, that concludes my report for this evening, Director Sincher.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome. Doctor, it'd be great to work with you. Thank you and welcome to Portland. We're going to move now to committee reports, and we'll just go, it looks like, not quite alphabetical, starting with the audit committee.
I believe I reported out last time that we have a full report to the board tonight on the completed PR audit.
Thank you. Anything from Director Green, Charter and Alternatives?
I have nothing new. That we have a meeting coming up next month, but that's it.
Thank you. How about intergovernmental, Director Lowry?
Meeting next in November.
Policy, Director Brim Edwards.
Thank you. I actually have, we had a recent meeting and just want to provide an update because there's going to be a lot of things coming to the board. Our primary focus was the climate crisis action policy. We heard a report from Director Shanice Clark about the community engagement that she led around the policy draft, and I'd encourage the non-committee members to review her written summary. We also had a significant amount of public comment on the draft, even though it wasn't out for public comment yet, or officially out for public comment yet. Because of that, the committee spent time discussing those recommendations and also some potential revisions to be proposed by committee members. Because of the substantial changes, the committee did not recommend a first reading. Instead, our next committee meeting will include a discussion of staff feedback on the new revisions, as well as consideration of proposed revisions by committee members. We also received a staff update on student conduct and discipline policy, as well as the potential future translation of our policies. The committee recommended 6 policies. I know this will make Director Scott happy, 6 policies for rescissions. I'm not going to go through them, but they'll be coming shortly to the board for a first reading. And they'll be on the board's November 2nd agenda for those first readings. The committee also had a discussion about foundations and other non-district entities purchasing FTE. This topic was a policy proposed by a parent group year before last, which based on feedback from staff, they revised and re-presented to the committee. So we had an initial discussion about that. And then in terms of the policies that we currently have out for first reading, there's 10 of them. We have 10 out for public comment. To date, we've received no comment and on any of the 10 policies. And I wanted to share with the board members, especially anyone who's not on the committee, that if there are substantive proposed amendments during the public comment period, we'll consider those in the committee. for consideration for revising the policy or making changes. And then the committee will make a recommendation to the board. But like I said, the 10 policies we have out for a public comment. We have not yet received any public comment on, but they're posted online on the PPS policies page, and anyone who wishes to comment, we welcome to hear from you. The public comment period for those ends on November 2nd. I also want to thank Jackson Robert for his sort of pinch hitting on our committee this summer and fall. So thank you for showing up and representing students. Also, I want to thank you for running a process for getting students appointed to the board committee, and we're going to be shortly welcoming Danny Cage, a grant student, to the committee. So thank you, Jackson, for facilitating the student voice on our committee. Sorry.
That's
It was
fantastic.
a long committee, substantive meeting.
Okay, how about facilities and operations? Dr. Hollins?
Yeah, none to report yet. We actually have our facilities and operations meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m.
Great. And I have a brief update of interest for the community on two topics the board has had in its work portfolio since July. At the June 15th, 2021 board meeting, the 2020-21 school board completed its work on the superintendent's annual evaluation. Given COVID and the challenges relating to assessing student progress, the board for the 2021 school year used an evaluation template that measured key leadership competencies and work underway during the pandemic versus a hybrid evaluation tool that assessed leadership competencies and targeted student growth at the 3rd, 5th, 8th, and post-secondary readiness, as well as ready for college and career. I want to clearly state that the board, superintendent, and district staff are aligned with and remain committed to the goals of accelerating achievement growth for Black, Native, and students of color that have been guiding our work for the past several years. In the face of a pandemic, ever-evolving science, shifting federal and state regulations, PPS had a responsibility to safeguard the health of students, families, and staff while ensuring that student learning continued. The superintendent, his team, and the school staff responded to these challenges with remarkable dedication and competence, improvising entirely new systems to reach our students with curriculum, technology, meals, school supplies, enrichment, and mental health supports. The evaluation recognized Superintendent Guerrero's dedicated and steady leadership of the district through a challenging year. Based on that evaluation, I've been in conversation with the superintendent regarding his contract and expect to bring an amendment or a contract revision forward for the board's consideration in a coming meeting. A second and related item is the board's work on a revised superintendent evaluation template for the 2021-2022 school year. The board held a public work session on the topic on October 12th. As we started the new school year, the 2021-22 school board is recommitted to resetting the annual superintendent evaluation template so that evaluation goals are again focused on accelerating growth for Black and Native students. The superintendent and staff are focusing improvement efforts by employing targeted universalism. That's an approach that sets universal targets and uses those strategies targeted to improve outcomes for all students, but focusing on the most underserved groups. Given many students did not participate in statewide or district level testing assessments last year, the board is reworking the timing, goals, sequencing, and evaluation tool to acknowledge that reset and prepare for the 2022-23 school year when we have a new baseline year. The board will have another session this fall on the evaluation template to refine those concepts and the assessment tool. I want to thank the board, Superintendent Guerrero, and staff for the collaborative work on these two issues. The next item, I'm sorry, we've already gone through our conference reports. I believe our next item is, we'll have comments from Portland Association of Teachers President Elizabeth Teal.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me? Great.
I hear you very well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair DePass and board directors and Superintendent Guerrero. I'm wasn't sure if I would still be speaking with you tonight, but I'm glad that I'm able to. We started this year knowing that it would be difficult as educators, and we were so excited to be back in our buildings full-time with our students. The pandemic is not over, and we started the year unsure what the year would bring. Since then, educators have been showing up every day and doing our very best for our students. However, we are more overwhelmed and stressed than ever before. For most educators, our workload has become untenable. This year, in addition to our regular responsibilities, educators are grappling with navigating additional health and safety protocols, the increased social, emotional, and academic needs of our students created by the pandemic, new curriculum adoptions and technology initiatives without the essential time for PD and training, the cascading impact of a system stretched beyond capacity. As you know, we continue to face ongoing staffing shortages, and I'm happy to hear the updates of some of those getting a little smaller. To educators, these shortages mean frequently being asked to fill in as a substitute during much needed planning time, or in some cases being reassigned entirely. It means students not getting the support they need when there's not enough para-educators, special education personnel, counselors, and other support people. It means classrooms and schools lacking basic cleanliness due to a shortage of custodians. And it means school-wide systems languishing when administrators' time and attention is pulled to cover for missing staff. I know the board is well aware of the district shortages and that the Human Resources Department has been doing a lot to recruit and hire new staff to fill vacancies. This is all very important and appreciated. But what I want to make sure you understand is that we cannot hire ourselves out of this worker shortage if we do not retain the staff that we have. Since the beginning of the year, PAT members from across the district have shared with us how overwhelmed and overstretched they are. We've heard from an unprecedented number of educators who are truly in crisis, fearing for their physical and mental health. We have also had an unprecedented number of members looking for advice about leaving their jobs at PPS or leaving the profession entirely. We recently surveyed our members to find out how common these experiences are. The results are truly shocking. And I want to make as clear for you as I can the magnitude of the crisis that we have on our hands so that we can work together to address it. And I have a few slides to share. Here we go. Educators are facing extreme workload. In our survey to members, which by the way, we had a 76% response rate, so it's about 2,800 educators responded. And more than 80% report that their workload is so high that they cannot accomplish their assigned tasks during their workday. And 25% said that no matter how much they work, no matter how many hours on weekends and evenings, they cannot accomplish what they set out to do. Educators report having overwhelming stress. 70% of educators reported stress levels that were high or severe this year, with 28% saying that their stress level is so high that it is impacting their health. And I can't say strongly enough, this isn't normal and it's not sustainable. And if we don't immediately address these workload-related stress of our educators, it's going to decimate our workforce. So we also asked educators about what they are thinking in terms of exiting the profession. We found that more than 1,000 educators indicated that they are currently considering taking a leave or resigning. In addition to those 1,000, 400 additional educators reported that they are considering retiring earlier than they had planned. So again, that's out of 2,800 educators who responded. If even a fraction of these educators leave the district, we will not be able to operate public schools as we know them. We know that these issues are not unique to PPS. And we're working in collaboration with other union leaders and other districts to promote statewide solutions. To frontline educators across the state, and I'm sure across the country, this is the fundamental issue facing our public school system right now. We have to make jobs in education manageable for the dedicated educators who want to serve our students. The good news is that we do have the opportunity to implement immediate solutions to make this year manageable for the experienced educators we already have, while we work toward long-term solutions to make sure a career in education can be fulfilling and sustainable for the current and future workforce. We are advocating for taking things off of educators' plates and creating time to do our jobs well in the way our students deserve. I hope that you will all join one of our upcoming listening sessions with educators to hear directly what people in our schools are experiencing this year and what we can do to make this year manageable and what long-term solutions we can work toward together. So I want to thank, I just sent an invitation to you guys today, and I already heard back from Chair DePass and Directors Brim, Edwards, and Lowry, and I hope to hear from all of you guys. I know it was, I hardly gave you any time yet, so I really hope to be able to set up a time for all of you guys to hear from our educators. I want to thank you for all you do on behalf of our students and your commitment to making sure our school system works. This is such a challenging year, and I just want to acknowledge that I know it's not just our educators, it's our board members, it's our administrators, it's our custodians, it's our paraeducators, it's our nutrition workers. We're all in this together, and that means we really have to be thinking about the solutions we need to make this work. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from, I'm not sure who the speaker is, the Portland Federation of School Professionals.
Michelle Batten. Michelle Batten. Michelle Batten.
Sweet. I only saw John McDuffie, so that's who I'm bringing over.
Thank you.
You're in the same room.
Thank you. Thank you, John McDuffie. You're free to go ahead if you can hear us.
Hi, it's actually Michelle Batten. Let's go start.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. We're sharing a laptop while we are together with this for the meeting. I'm Michelle Batten. I'm the president of PFSP. I know many of you, and many of you know me from my 11 years as a field rep prior to becoming president this year. I'm here this evening for two reasons. One, to support my PAT colleagues with their workload issues and the information they provided, and to share with you our own classified staffing shortages, especially in the area of special education support, like paraeducators, CNAs, and therapeutic intervention coaches. These are some of the stories that I've been hearing from work sites. At one school, a special ed classroom where, based on the student need, there should be 5 paraeducators. They have 1. Starting this week, they have 2. This is not only an overwhelming burden on our employees, it is an enormous safety issue for both students and staff. At another elementary school, where the school administrative assistant, formerly known as the principal secretary, races down to the cafeteria for 3 hours every day to help nutrition services staff prepare and distribute lunch because they too are short-staffed. A library assistant at yet another school is the only staff available to help a brand new teacher when there are severe behavior issues. The teacher can't call upon her administrators. They're already in classrooms teaching because of staffing shortages. All of these people give 200% every day, all day, but they can't continue working like this. It's not good for them, it's not good for the students, and it's not safe. We're in a state of emergency. Please make adequate staffing a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I'm going to now hear a report to the board on Division 22. Superintendent Guerrero, would you please introduce this next item?
Yes, Chair. Directors, by the first day of November, some of you know, of each year, school district superintendents across the state are required by statute to report out to their communities on the district status with respect to all of the standards for public elementary and secondary schools. These standards are referred to as Division 22 and are adopted by the State Board of Education and set out in Oregon Administrative Rules, Chapter 5A1. Tonight, providing the annual report to the board is our Deputy Superintendent for Instruction in School Communities, Dr. Sean Berg.
Oh, Kara, can you admit Dr. Berg into the meeting?
Yes, just a sec.
Good evening, board directors. Tonight, I'm pleased to present the Division 22 report, and also there's a slide deck. So, okay. Here we go. So, next slide, please. So again, this report is given every year annually. This report covers the last school year, so the 1920 21 school year. And just as a reminder why we do this, this is provides some joint accountability from the Oregon Department of Education as well as the school district, and it gives us a chance to make sure that we are providing basic level of education to our students, but it's so it should be thought of as a floor, not a ceiling. Next slide. A couple of changes to the assurance process this year. So the timeline has moved from February to November. So every November 1st, this has to be posted for public review and then submitted to the ODE on the 15th. And now all districts have a uniform template. Next slide. So there have been some changes last year due to the pandemic in the Division 22 standards. So a few notable things that were waived were the assessment of essential skills for high school students as a graduation requirement, the kindergarten assessment, and also the identification of gifted and talented students. Those were completely waived last year, and we'll talk about that as we go along. Next slide. For a new addition last year, you might remember, Ready School Safe Learners. Only for last year, it was as a result of the pandemic. And we also have some new reporting requirements. The annual report on restraint and seclusion is posted on our website for the public to view. And we have Every Student Belongs Act, we talked about some last year. Those rules are fully in effect as of the 2021 school year, as well as the Suicide Prevention Act. Next slide. Okay, we already talked about this briefly. So we're reporting out by November 1st. After this meeting, the report will be publicly posted on our website for the public to review, and then by the 15th, we'll send the report to ODE. Next slide. Over the past several years, we've made improvements in the district. We have implemented corrective action plans on these topics. Teacher training related to dyslexia, school libraries, prevention in drugs and alcohol education, and human sexuality education, as well as the complaint procedure. So now all of these things that were once out of compliance are now in compliance. That has over the last several years. Next slide. And we are out of compliance this year for the 2021 school year on state assessments because we didn't give the assessment last year, but that will be corrected this year. We are returning to the SBAC. And so once we do that, will be in compliance with this OER. Next slide. We also have a corrective action plan for instructional materials, but thanks to the generosity of the Portland voters, we are able to now have this corrected, and we've adjusted our timeline for instructional materials adoption. So over the next several years, we will be in line. We've submitted a plan to the ODE that will be approved. We expect approval on that, and that is just matching the adoptions to the state timeline. And you know that our first, well, actually, it's our first large adoption of K-5 math materials happened for this school year, and that will continuing adoptions for the next several years. So you can see, by the way, the instructional materials action plan is linked. It was in your materials. Also, we have our talented and gifted corrective action time plan. So we did not assess students last year due to the pandemic. So this year, what we are doing right now is assessing third graders. Normally we assess second graders, but we're assessing third graders in the fall for those students who missed out. And then right after the winter break, we'll come back and assess second graders. So that will keep us in line with that requirement. And then one area that we continue to work on is physical education. So the PE requirements were modified in 2021. K students were required to receive PE throughout the year. And we were out of compliance on this because K-5 students received PE throughout the year, but 6-8 students received it. They received 1 quarter of health, 1 quarter of PE, so this accounts throughout the year. For students in 6-8, we're required to run 150 minutes a week. I'm sorry, 225 minutes a week in grade 6 to 8. So for the 21-22 school year, K-5 students are staffed to receive 90 minutes per week, and grade 6-8 students are staffed to receive 1 quarter of health and 1 quarter of PE for 225 minutes each year. Next slide. So we have a plan to bring this into compliance, but it's going to take several years. It's a multi-year plan to bring it into alignment. So for K-5, for the 22-23 school year, we should be in compliance if we adjust a board resolution to have 15 minutes of structured time 4 days a week. This would add 60 minutes to the PE time that K-5 students receive. We'll have to come back to you later with more details on this plan because it's going to require some discussions with our labor partners who will affect teaching day. And then for 6-8, we plan to be in compliance by 24-25. And that will be through increasing staffing so we can offer PE throughout the year instead of 1 quarter of health, 1 quarter of PE. So that will require a budget investment. And so we'll be, again, coming back to you with more information on that in the coming weeks. And that concludes the Division 22 report. Again, it'll be posted on our website by next week, and it'll be submitted to the ODE 15.
Thank you. Questions? Okay. Yeah, please.
Well, first I want to thank staff for the work to really move us towards that sort of baseline standard because some of the issues have been longstanding issues at the district, and despite the pandemic, I'm seeing forward progress. So I really appreciate that for our students. And from just looking through the report, the details of the staff memo we got, it appears that some, at least half of them, are essentially waived standards because of the pandemic. So I just want to just sort of level set in terms of the go forward. So that this year there was an allowance to use additional PD, or I'm sorry, for the 2021 to be able to use 60 additional hours, count PD as instructional time, for actually two 60s. And also 60 hours of parent-teacher time, counting as instructional time. And just to clarify, for this year and going forward, we're back to the normal standard.
That's correct. That was a one-time exception so that we could go into distance learning.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify that. And then On the instructional materials, again, just to repeat your thanks to the voters, the community for supporting the bond, which should get us into compliance. I just, the other piece about having new curriculum and new materials is the professional development, so the teachers can, and school staff can effectively implement it. And so is that also built into the corrective action plan, or is it just the actual materials?
So the whole adoption process is lengthy and stakeholder involvement throughout. But once it's adopted, then we have training for, so I'll use math, for example. We had training in the summer for teachers and administrators that they could choose to attend. We also, in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement, have to provide training during the school year. So we had 2 days in September for those who couldn't go to the training in the summer. Most people went during the summer, but yeah, it's through the contract we do have to have it during the workouts. But it's minimal interruption to student. There's substitute teachers go to the training.
So we have the capacity. We have the funds and the plan for the to actually get the material, which would put us in compliance with Division 22, and an adequate professional development plan, also that allows the uptake in the system.
Right, and then there's also, in addition to like the initial training, then there's also time and staff meetings throughout the year. There's time built in to the school calendar to be able to, so the teachers can time. There's PLC time for them to work on this, there's staff meeting time. So there's various times throughout to recalibrate and work on implementation.
And I just have one last question. So one of the longest standing standards that we've been out of compliance with is the talented and intellectually gifted program. And I looked at the materials, and it looks like we're moving towards compliance. What's the target date? Like I say, that has just been
The most challenging part of this issue is that it's to verify that every teacher, talented and gifted student is being provided a differentiated environment. It's very hard to prove that. You have to monitor. I mean, we do monitor, but that's one of the challenges. Is the rating level. So we do a training for that in the PD every year in staff meetings, and we provide the information to teachers, and we also provide live training as well as asynchronous course for them to do that. And we continue to improve. We had from talented and gifted, so we continue to improve.
And Dr. Bird, was that waived similarly because of pandemic, because of virtual learning is too difficult to do that differentiated?
The assessment.
It was the assessment that was the reason it was waived, because we couldn't assess for second graders. Yeah, but that's back in.
So is there an endpoint though that if we continue to implement, that we'll be in compliance with that standard?
That is certainly our aim. To continue to. And we have results from we'll have results from a talented gifted audit that we can take a look at and those.
I'm just curious about how far we're out of compliance. Is that we're not doing the assessments early enough? I mean, I don't know enough about the assessment process and how I know the differentiated learning piece.
The assessment was only just last year because we couldn't do it because of CDL, but this year we'll be fine this year. We're doing right now to get into compliance.
Is the compliance piece then that we're not operating, we don't have the capacity to do the differentiated learning?
The verification.
The verification.
It's confusing because they switched now. It used to be the current year, report on the current year, and now it's a look back. So it's a look back. So we may actually be in compliance now.
It'll be reported next year this time. To do this. Exciting as well.
Thank you for your report.
It's a lot of work. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions before we move on to the next item? Our next item is amendment of the 2021-22 academic calendar. Superintendent Guerrero, can you please introduce this next item?
Yes, Chair. Again, I'm going to ask Deputy Byrd to share with directors the rationale for a recommendation to convert November 12th, that's the Friday following Veterans Day holiday, from a school day to a district-wide professional development day. Dr. Byrd?
All right, thank you, Superintendent Guerrero. As you saw in the staff report, we have made a request to make November 12th a professional development day, and there's a couple of reasons I want to talk to you about that. We have, as I mentioned in the last report, implemented a new math curriculum this year, and and we have done initial training for teachers, as well as other priorities of the system that we are training our teachers on. We have, as we've heard, had operational challenges this year in terms of substitute educators, and we've just had operational challenges that have not allowed the normal mechanisms we have in place to continue training our teachers to be as effective, because teachers are subbing during their conference period in some cases, and they just have not had the time that they normally would have had to plan and to recalibrate. Anytime you implement a new curriculum, you need time. Teachers need time to recalibrate after they have had the initial training. So we are proposing that the day after Veterans Day, which is Thursday, so the day after will be a Friday, that be converted to a staff professional development day. It'll be a district-directed staff development, so it'll be differentiated based on the grade level. So K-5 would be based on math to calibrate on that. 6-8 will be science, PD on science adoption that recently occurred. And 6-12 will also work on some math field test PD. And then our 6-12 teachers have also been, 6-12 leadership has also been working on 3 different buckets of work: creating equity, student engagement, and cultural sustaining pedagogy. So this will be a chance to really do some more deep work with teachers in this area. And as you know, that's related to our graphical portrait and our strategic plan. So we also have seen this year we have, if you think about a new teacher this year, a student taught in virtual school, and so they've never actually been in a classroom really until this year. So, one of the most challenging aspects of starting your career in education is classroom management. That has been certainly exacerbated this year with students coming back from different levels of need. So we need to spend some time with teachers who need that extra support to be able to provide. And then we want to give our teachers time to have some collaborative planning time with their colleagues. So it would be district-directed time, and we will provide, from the central office, will provide the materials and the training to the schools. I'll take your questions.
I just want to say this is a tough one for me, because I just think all the time that our students have back in the classroom is so incredibly precious, as we all know. And as we're all waiting to see where our kids stand from our first round of math assessments. But I also think it's incredibly important that they're getting the kind of instruction that they need. And it was heartbreaking for me to hear stories about our new curriculum adoptions that were funded by our taxpayers through our bond initiative, still remaining on the shelf and not being taught because teachers haven't had the opportunity to have the PD to get going on that. So I think it's critically important, and I surprised myself by supporting this, since I've fought so hard always for maximum instructional hours for our students. But it's also really important for us to focus on quality of instruction and support for our educators. So I will be voting yes.
Do we have other directors that would like to weigh in at this time?
Do you want to get a motion on the table?
I can get a motion on the table. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 6389, resolution to approve a change to the 2021-22 Portland Public School District calendar to make Friday, November 12th, 2021, Professional Development Day?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, Director Lowry moved, Director Constam seconded, as did Director Green.
So I have
Do you have
a couple questions and then some comments. So they're not rhetorical questions, they're just looking for some assurance that This is just a one-year conversion of an instructional day to a professional development day.
That's great.
Because as we talked about in the Division 22, the instructional materials are coming with PD and it's an unusual year. And then the other one is for next year, do you anticipate the school calendar will be set when we adopt it? Or that we have mid-year adjustments?
Oh, you mean, well, do we anticipate coming back to change it after the initial?
Yeah. So, okay.
No, I mean, we want to give people enough time to plan, have the calendar set. This is very unusual circumstance.
Okay. So like Director Constam, I was really conflicted when I had a call last week about the unexpected shift, and I sat down and just went through the why no's and why yeses. Because I was trying to think like where to land. So the why yeses, like it's been previously stated, making sure that our teachers have the ability to implement a new curriculum and have the materials and how to use them is super important for counting, and we're going to be making that shift to student growth. As just confirmed, I guess the other reason would be it's a 1-year loss of an instructional day or conversion to professional day. I'm also, the reason to vote yes is not to buy into the anti-teacher rhetoric that's circulating, that this is something other than it is. And it's better to have it now than later in the year. So teachers can implement it and use our new materials. On the other hand, I really feel for our parents for the cumulative impact, especially parents who are hourly workers, because November we've already got 5 days of Thanksgiving week that if you have to show up. And then we've got a planning day, and then Veterans Day, which a lot of hourly workers don't get off, and then also another day. So I feel really conflicted. So I hope we're doing all we can, especially with short notice, that to support parents who need that support in a month in which we don't have, I say it's cumulative. It's just 1 day, but it adds up. Also, another reason to not be supportive is that we already lost a lot of instruction. Again, it's 1 day, but it's just cumulative. And I think and this is a little bit of the yes and the no, but when Superintendent Guerrero came, there was a big change to the calendar that made the calendar much more family friendly, and that's something that I think we all embraced, most of us being parents, that having a family friendly calendar was important. So I hope you're not drifting back to something that is just hard for parents. I know it's not intentionally hard for parents, it just is. So there's reasons on both sides of it. I think given that it's thinking out loud here, but because it's a 1-year conversion, I think I can support it. I just want to be thoughtful about how we move ahead. Everybody's in addition to staff, students are fragile this year as well. I hate to bring something unexpected, on top of everybody else's lives a little bit from
May I hear from other board members that have been quiet, if you have something to offer?
Bailey has her hand raised.
I'm sorry, I can't see that. Yes, go ahead, Director Lowry.
So I just wanted to say that I really appreciate staff bringing this to us, and I see this as staff being nimble and responsive to the situation. We heard our PAT union president talk about staff burnout, and I know that we've had higher absences on Fridays and Mondays with all of our staff, including classified staff. And I'm really thankful that my schedule allows me to volunteer at a school on Mondays and Fridays. So I'm taking a lunch duty shift on Mondays and Fridays at one of our elementary schools to just support our overextended staff. And so I think for me, one of the reasons I will be voting yes on this tonight is that, that Friday is coming back after a holiday. That's hard. And so I think if we look at, trying to make sure we have adequate subs in all of our classrooms and trying to predict what might happen that day, I think it's in the best interest of student safety to do that. And again, I'm not trying to be anti-teacher or blame teachers here, but I think we've seen a pattern develop this year, and our staff is being responsive to that. And our staff is also being responsive to the fact that we do need to do this math professional development. We know that math is the area that students lost the most during the pandemic. And so this early in the year, giving our teachers extra support in this new curriculum, I think is a win-win. So that is why I'll be voting yes. And so I know that this isn't what we normally do, have changes to the calendar like this in the year, but I appreciate our staff not just continuing to do the same old thing because it's what's on the paper, but really looking at what do our teachers need, what do our students need, what do our families need, and what tools can we use to be the most responsive to the needs of our community so that our teachers can be successful, our students can be successful, and we can live into our strategic plan and our board goals.
Thank you. Director Scott?
Thanks. I'll be brief just to sort of piggyback on those. Obviously, losing a day of learning isn't great, but on the other hand, I think gaining a day of professional development, which is sorely needed, is. And one of the directors mentioned just a few minutes ago, the anti-teacher rhetoric out there is pretty extreme and frankly pretty troubling. And I've been dismayed by it. There's not a profession in the world that doesn't benefit from professional development, and that includes our teachers especially. And just sort of looking at, this is not something that any employer, having not, been able to find that time, that's actually a real negative. And it's not a negative for teachers, it's a negative for our students. And so I just been really troubled by the emails I've been getting, which again are very anti-teacher and as a result are very anti-student, because they're not looking at what our teachers are going to gain, what our education professionals are going to gain from this day. And this is outlined in the staff report, and I won't go into it given our time, but there's a lot that they're going to gain, which I think is going to dramatically outweigh what our students lose. And I'll just piggyback on Director Lowry's comments. That is the reason the staff are putting this forward, is because they have weighed the cost benefit and said, this is really important. It's important for our teachers and our students, and it outweighs that loss. And I certainly will be supporting this moving forward. And I thank staff for bringing it.
Thank you. Director Green?
They used to, back in the day, when you went to the airport and you got on a plane, they had the stewardess would get on, or the steward, or whatever, you call them, and they would say, in the event of an accident, when the mask drops down, I want you to put the mask on yourself first and then put it on the child. And there's a logic behind that, because if you attempt to put the mask on the child and the plane goes down and they get depleted of oxygen, the child may not know what to do or how to care for or how to fend for themselves or how to do what needs to be done, or even to resuscitate the adult that might be out and unconscious due to a lack of oxygen, because they're simply that. They're the child. We don't expect them to know all of these things. But if you put it on the adult and the plane goes down, then if there's something that needs to be done to resuscitate the child, to fend for the child, to find food for the child, to go out and create shelter for the child, then the adult has the capability of doing that. It's ironic to me that we recognize this and we say, yes, that makes perfect sense in every regard, but this. How is it possible that, that we don't see the benefit of making sure that our educators who are going to be educating our children have everything that they need to do that effectively and efficiently, and not be doing it on their dime. We want them to get the education. We want them to read all the books. We want them to go through all the stuff. But we also tell them, when are they going to do that? This affords us to be able to allow them to get that development that they need so that they can continue to educate our children on our dime. We're paying for it. We're making sure that they can get it, and they're not having to go into their time, their family time, their children's time, everybody else's time in order to make sure that they know what they need to do in order to effectively and efficiently educate our next generation of leaders. So I'm in total support of this, and I'm not going to be, saying try to dumb it down and just be like, well, it's just a day. It's only one day, but it's a day. Get the kids, get the teachers what they need so that they can come back fully equipped and ready to do what we expect them to do every day of the week that they're there. So I'm absolutely yes. And I know we ain't got to the voting yet, but I'm a preacher. I'm gonna stop talking right now.
It's a tremendous amount of self-discipline, Director Green. Thank you. I don't have anything to add that hasn't already been said, but we all know this is not a normal year. And that means business can't happen as normal. I'm fully supportive of this day of professional development because I feel like the teachers need support. Our teachers need to be prepared to teach with this new curriculum. I really appreciate that PD focused on math and science. Those are very important skills, 21st century skills that our kids need to be fluent in. Is there anything else before we go to a vote?
Yeah, I was very conflicted as well. I think all of the pros and cons that were said, totally agree with all of them. And I went through like the exact same process as everyone else has described. But in the interest of trying to be student-centered, I tried to eliminate stuff that I didn't think was as student-centered in my mind. I try to focus on the pros and cons for students. And I think the con is obviously we're losing instructional time. The pro, on the other hand, is every other hour after this professional development is going to be better, right? So I think the overall benefit of taking these 6 hours is going to compound over the rest of the school year versus having these 6 hours, which will be a one-time thing that we don't get to compound on throughout the entire year. Also, I guess a con that I do see is we're giving super late notice, as Director Burnett-Edwards mentioned, for anyone who can't take off work or is scrambling for childcare services on that day. It's going to be a super hard lift for them. And I hope we do have something from PPS that can help them.
Thank you. I also have a tremendous amount of empathy for parents. I'm a single parent, and late break changes were difficult, and yet the skills I have from adapting really quickly to Plan B are incredible. There's something to be said for having to muscle through these decisions. I believe we have someone signed up for public comment on this, Ms. Bradshaw.
We do. We have Maya Von Geldern, and I'm bringing her over right now.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Thank you for your time, Chair DePass and board directors, as well as Superintendent Guerrero. My name is Maya Von Geldern, last name spelled lowercase v as in Victor, O-N, space, capital G-E-L-D-E-R-N, and my pronouns are she, her. I have 2 kiddos in PPS. When asked to speak or to be given some time to speak tonight, it was motivated by comments I had seen regarding this calendar change being something to blame our teachers and our teachers union for again. And it blew my mind, as if the district was contemplating making a last minute change to their calendar because, and I quote, the teachers just want a 4-day weekend. Really? That's not how it works. I know it's not. I also know we won't have the staff available to keep schools open on November 12th, given the lack of substitutes available on a daily basis. I see our admin filling in consistently and all of our support staff filling in consistently, and there's no way we would be able to do that on that Friday. So let's not give in to the nonsense that this is a request that's coming from teachers. However, To be fully transparent, if teachers had come together to say that we need a day for whatever reason, I would be supportive. As a teacher at our school said last week, everyone wants to pretend that we're back to normal, but there is nothing normal about this year. And I see that every day. I see our teachers being weighed down continually with new protocols, new safety measures, new curriculum adoptions, new drop-off and pickup routines, and the list goes on. Ms. Teal just attested to the fact that teachers carry the weight of this pandemic in ways that we don't see when we ask our kids how their day went. We just don't. It was fine, Mom. But that doesn't reflect what I see in my teachers' eyes when I pick them up or when I drop them off or when I'm volunteering and I see how hard they're working. Teachers have lamented that when things are hard and their cups feel empty, there are usually ways to fill the cups back up. The fun community events at school and their school assemblies, etc. But with so much on their plates and so little time to plan, it's been hard. A teacher shared just the other day, I go to bed each night thinking, thank God I love my students and can't wait to see them each day, because other than them, there doesn't seem to be much that makes the hard parts worth this in the end. Our kids are stressed. Clearly we are stressed for so many reasons that we don't always mutually understand. The kids are happy to be back in school, but are having to adjust to being back to school. When relearning how to be in our classrooms or school building, we are asking kids to let go of all that they've gotten used to in the last year and a half. We're asking them to relearn how to treat school property, how to treat our faculty and staff, how to treat each other, and it's been stressful.
Ms. Van Gelder?
Yes, I know my time is up.
Hit your comments. I have to let you know your time is up.
That is fine. I just thank you for, it seems like I'm not the only one who will be hoping that you vote yes tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
That concludes who we have signed up.
Chair, I would call the question.
Can you repeat yourself, please?
Just calling the question.
I was just calling the question.
Yeah, just call. Oh, yes, please.
No, I would call the question to move to a vote.
We are moving to a vote. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 6389, resolution to approve a change to the 2020-2021 Portland Public School District calendar to make, oh, I'm sorry.
You have a motion.
We've already done that. So the board will now vote. I'm sorry, I'm very tired today. The board will vote on resolution 6389, resolution to approve a change to the 2020-2021 Portland Public School District calendar to make Friday, November 12th, a professional development day. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6389 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Weinberg voting
Yes.
Chair, can I just make a comment? Thank you for considering this recommendation that we just heard from Teacher Van Geldern and others. We believe, and we're equally conflicted. We talked about the pros and cons. We'll always prioritize student learning time. But a school system is made up of the people that work within it. And if we don't pause and acknowledge that we need to invest some time in them to regroup, engage in important professional learning for a better day, just want to thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you. You're welcome. On behalf of all my colleagues here. We've got now a report to the board, the procurement card audit. Director Constam, would you please introduce this next item?
Sure. I really want to just introduce our internal performance auditor, Janice Hansen, who's going to make a brief presentation to the board. And also, just as a matter of protocol, We will not be voting on accepting this audit. This audit is concluded. But we will, as a matter of course, have any finished audits come before the full board. I think it's really important that the whole board have visibility into the work of the audit committee because it is unique from our other committees in that the auditors report to the board and we all have responsibility for oversight of that function. So we'll be having all that come to the full board as opposed to just the committee. So Ms. Hanson, are you there somewhere? Kara, is Janice Hanson with us?
She is. It looks like she's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There is a presentation slides. If someone could pull those up and share them, that would be awesome.
We've got it.
Okay, great. So to start, I wanted to start today with saying thank you first. Sometimes I put it at the end, and so I wanted to say thank you first to the Purchasing and Contracting Department, specifically the P-card manager. So the next slide, please. The P-card manager and as well as the P-card auditor were fantastic to work with, and they really collaborated with us and provided us feedback that really helped the ending result of the audit be fantastic. So next slide, please. A little bit of background here. The P-card audit was included in the Office of Internal Performance Audit, which we call OIPA. The 1920 audit plan that was approved by the Board of Education. It is a little delayed because we did stop work on this mid-audit to do the health and safety checks audit, but it's really nice to get this one wrapped up, and I'm sure that the Purchasing and Contracting Department appreciates wrapping it up as well. Next slide, please. So I printed the actual report and put it and Kara handed those out. If you have them, then that would be great.
Jonathan, need to unmute. Janice, just one second.
Someone muted over here.
Yeah, anybody has them.
So,
Janice, hang on just a second. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, you couldn't hear us before, so that means we fixed our problem. But as far as you're concerned, it would be great if you could speak a little louder because we were having a little bit of trouble hearing.
I'll pull my computer closer. Okay. So if you have your audit report, either online or the one I printed for you guys, if you could open it to page 8. It goes over the audit objective. I highlighted it in the printed copy for you. So the objective of the audit was to assess the adequacy of internal controls of the school district's P-card program and determine whether the P-card activity is compliant with the applicable policies, procedures, administrative directives, and best practices. For the conclusion, that is at the bottom of page 9. So based off the results of the audit, we found that the school district's internal controls over P-card usage are adequate to ensure or to maintain overall integrity of the school district's P-card program. The audit did not identify any evidence of intentional fraud, but did identify opportunities for improvement and some instances of non-compliance. The audit results and recommendations are included as well in the report. So for the recommendations, if you go in your report to page 5, in the executive, the full recommendations and procedures and stuff are included further back in the report, but the executive summary kind of gives a high-level overview of what the recommendations were. So the audit made 13 recommendations, and the Purchasing and Contracting Department agreed with 11, and partly agreed with the remaining recommendations were made incrementally throughout the audit because we did take that pause. So as a result, implementation of 4 of our recommendations are already completed. So you can see there on page 5 and following on to page 6, highlighted whether or not you agreed or partly agreed with, and listed whether or
Kara,
not.
hang on one second, Janice. Kara, can you mute your audio, please?
Yeah, sorry about that.
And it also lists whether or not the implementation of it is complete or not. So it was a great audit. I want to draw your attention to the very end of the audit report in the Appendix B. There is a memo there from the P-card manager back in April 4th of 2019. And this really describes a lot of the internal controls that were implemented as a result of the recommendations made by the Secretary of State's audit report. So all of those things were already done and implemented by the time we started our audit, which really led to our audit being much cleaner. And the recommendations are really intended more to assist the purchasing and contracting department in strengthening those internal controls to further reduce the work, because what they had going and what they've been working on over the last couple of years is really great. So if you guys have any questions, I can answer those.
I do hope everybody's had an opportunity to dig into this report. Just very good news. I want to highlight what Janice just said, which is that there were a lot of reforms made to this procurement card process and management prior to this audit starting. So this was almost like check of a lot of those reforms that took place as there were a lot of internal changes within the finance department and a lot of new procedures put in place. But this is a great example of why it's important to have this function of the internal performance auditor to make sure that these kinds of controls are in good working order. So does anyone, and also wanted to just make a general comment about the work of the audit committee. This is a perfect example of this in our ACH audit that also is taking place of more operational issues that called for some review, but as an audit committee, we really want to talk about pivoting toward issues that are more directly related to student performance and using this function of the internal auditor to really review some of that. So does anybody have any questions in particular about the procurement card audit? Everyone's just thrilled to tears that it was so good.
I just want to say, as the former chair of the audit committee when this audit started, that I think there was concerns about whether it's going to be a gotcha audit and what the purpose of it was. And I think reading through the report, what strikes me is it's really a strong statement that we have the internal controls, there's accountability, the value of an independent auditing office has real value, especially when they work with staff in the spirit of continuous improvement, because that is where we get the real value for the district. So I really, not just the Office of the Internal Performance Audit, but also the staff, the other side who were sort of the audited, and really coming out with, I think, practices and improvements that are good financial controls for the district. So thanks to both parties.
I just want to say that the audit reflects a level of collaboration between the auditor's office and staff that is, I'm not used to seeing in government, public service, and that makes me happy. And yeah, that the list of recommendations are all agreed and being addressed. So nice work, Internal Auditor's Office.
Yes, thank you, Janice.
Thank you so much. I also just wanted to conclude by saying we did do a little bit deeper of a dive into some of the recommendations in the audit committee meeting. So I kept it kind of brief and high level here. But thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to present. And I also want to just conclude by saying thanks to the purchasing and contracting department again, because it really was nice to work with them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm gonna pause us for about 5 minutes. We know we're late. We got a late start, but I think benefit me at least have a 5-minute stretch.
Sounds good.
In 5 minutes. Thanks for your patience. We're now going to move to a discussion about a possible COVID-19 vaccine requirement for students aged 12 up. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this next item?
Yes, thank you, Chair DePass. As you recall, on September 28th, we heard from public health experts and national pediatric doctors on the impact and consequences of requiring COVID-19 vaccinations for students aged 12 and older to attend school. Following that discussion, we have since held several listening sessions to gather input from families and at least one student listening session. But here this evening, I'd like to invite my Chief of Staff, Jonathan Garcia, to share a summary of some of the feedback that we've received as you begin your discussion this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero. So what I have in front of you on your screen is a quick deck just to orient the conversation, but everything that you have in this deck that's in front of you has already been shared with you via the memo and the attachment. So it's just for the focus of the conversation. So as the superintendent just outlined, the board has been engaged in this conversation about whether or not PPS should require all students 12 years and older to be vaccinated against COVID-19. So last month, you heard from our health experts talk about the consequences and the precedent and the impacts of requiring COVID-19 vaccinations to attend school. And you were provided a staff report, and obviously you all attended that meeting. I think it's also important to know, as the superintendent just alluded to, we did host a number of listening sessions and also receive written feedback from members of our community, students, families, et cetera. Obviously, we're here tonight, and after your discussions today, we hope to hear kind of what you aspire as the next step in the ongoing conversation. As I shared with you via email and now on this slide, and we've shared that based on the conversations today, you might choose to have a possible board vote on the matter next week on November 2nd. So in terms of what we heard from our community, as the superintendent alluded to, we hosted a number of listening sessions for students and families while encouraging our families to weigh in via written feedback. So we did receive over 300 feedback that you have in front of you. I will note that we have received feedback in the last 24 to 48 hours. And so as soon as we're able to sit down and analyze that, we will definitely be sharing that information with you. But of the 300 plus written feedback, 63% of the written feedback was in support of requiring student vaccinations for students. And as many of you all attended the listening sessions, the majority of the voices we heard at these family listening sessions were against a vaccine requirement for students. And I also shared in your documents a research poll conducted by DHM last month that indicated 70% of people in the Portland metro area support a vaccine requirement for students. And you can see the document here to your right. So in terms of what we heard from, we heard from folks in support, we heard from folks against a requirement, and we had folks who just wanted to share additional feedback. And for the folks that we heard say that they're in support of requiring a vaccination for students. This is some of the things that we heard. There's enough. We heard a lot of folks talk about that there is enough evidence and scientific review that suggests that this vaccine is healthy, is effective in protecting against serious illness or death. We also heard from folks that requiring a COVID-19 vaccine at this moment is a good public health decision that will benefit everybody in our community. Folks also talked about the historical precedent, as you heard earlier today, here at PPS and across the US. Required immunization is part of attending schools. We also heard from families and students that requiring all students to be vaccinated will increase the communal confidence that everyone will be more protected against the disease. And I think that's an important mental health, and we heard that quite a bit. And as you all know, and it was shared in your staff analysis, a number of school districts, both big and small, large urbans and small rural districts, have already required the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine across the country. And the last point that I think was allowed in the written feedback and in feedback in general, supporting a requirement is that it was messaged to the broader community that PPS is being guided by public health and not by politics. In terms of folks who said that they're not in support of this requirement, we heard a little bit of, you heard folks talk about that it was too early to require a vaccination for COVID-19 because there are so many unknowns and risks that have not yet been fully understood. We also heard folks question the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine, weighing natural immunity over vaccination. We also heard from folks talk about exclusion and the possibility that this requirement would exclude certain students. We heard also a desire from folks to around the importance of accepting and building tolerance towards individuals who do not want to get vaccinated, regardless of the reason. I think we also heard and we hear a lot of folks talk about individual choice or family choice versus a district or government choice. And so I think that's also something that we heard loud and clear in that feedback. We've heard from folks, and this was said by one of our public health experts, talking about how mandates are really the last resort, if you will, after folks are encouraged to volunteer to get their vaccine, and mandates serve as kind of the last draw. And so folks expressed that what public health experts have shared with us. Again, when you heard folks talk about there are little risk of serious illness for children. Again, talked about encouragement versus a mandate, right? Really thinking about how do we provide the support so folks can and the education so folks can learn about the COVID-19 vaccine. We also heard from folks that requiring the vaccine might create a false sense of safety because of individuals who are vaccinated and yet are testing positive, or in other words, breakthrough cases, right? And then the last piece that we heard is around a general fear and distrust of public health and the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that should be noted for in terms of what we're hearing. As the directors consider this conversation, I think what we heard a few other things that I think it's important to call out. If you do require vaccination for students, it would be important that you provide non-medical religious exemptions at minimum, is what we heard on one end. We also heard from folks that you should consider a COVID-19 vaccine when it's fully approved by the FDA. And the last thing we heard, and something that we as a school district and as a public education institution, we want to make sure that we create culturally relevant content for students and families to understand the vaccine and have them weigh that decision. So, directors, you also in your package, you were given this matrix, if you will. So what we wanted to do is, and I'm going to turn it over to you at this point, Director or Chair to pass. We wanted to give you kind of something to work with. So really, when we think about what you're discussing tonight and potentially voting on, is looking at these four options, right? So option one is, would the board consider requiring students 12 years of age and older who are participating in activities shown to be high risk for transmission, so sports, choir, band, etc. Should those students be required only to receive a vaccination or to be required to be vaccinated? Option B is 12 years of age and older to be fully vaccinated. And again, understanding here, the top consideration is that the Pfizer vaccine is available under FDA emergency use for students 12 to 15 years of age, and it is fully authorized for students 16 years and older. Meaning, and so your third option, option C, is really about 16 years of age and older. And obviously, you also, as a board, have the option not to require the COVID-19 vaccine for PPS students at this time. So we believe these are some of your options, or these are your options. Obviously, we're not, the board is not in discussion around the 5 to 11-year-old vaccination, because as we know, it is not yet fully approved or approved for emergency use authorization at this point. After part A, after those 4 choices, I think the board has to weigh the conversation around exemptions. So as we know, we will provide medical, if there is a requirement for vaccines, we would provide medical exemptions. And so the question on the table for the board is, would you consider, so the state immunization, ORS, state law allows for school district to be more restrictive in its exceptions. And so then the question on the table is, does the board want to just offer religious exemptions as a non-medical exemption, or does the board want to also provide a philosophical exemption? And you will have to weigh those costs as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Chair DePass for you to have that conversation. I also want to note that staff is here and ready to take notes. And if you need additional information or things before you can make a decision, we're here to support your decision and your conversation. So with that, Chair DePass.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for your providing that overview and pointing us to the documents that we've already received. Colleagues, at this time, I'm going to invite us into a conversation. As you just heard, as chaired by staff, we hope that tonight we have an opportunity to narrow the options on the screen. Those are the options on the decision matrix that's in your workbook packet. To narrow the options on the screen for consideration, determine if we're ready to consider a vote on the matter, and determine that we need more information before making a decision. So I'd like to open the floor for just open conversation. I'd love to hear from board members, and if you could, you've got the decision matrix up there. I don't know if we want to go alphabetical, or I feel that might be somewhat restrictive, but I want to bring us back to those meeting agreements about the why am I talking, and I know that's not exactly how we phrased it, but I really want to make a point to hear from everybody is what I'm trying to say. Are we in agreement? Does who would like to go first on your initial thoughts? Again, what we have in front of us are, we've got this decision matrix with 4 options on it. We can just make a determination based on, or make decisions or ask questions around whether or not 12 years in age and older participating in extracurriculars. Another option would be 12 years of age and older to be fully vaccinated. Option C would be 16 years of age and older to be fully vaccinated. Option D is no requirement of the COVID-19 vaccination for any student at this time.
Well, I guess I'll start. Somebody got to start talking.
Thank you, Director Green. Please go ahead.
So I guess I'm at odds with this because I'm not comfortable telling anyone that they have to. You have to get your kids vaccinated if you want them to be educated by us, especially when we're talking about the the younger kids, the 12-year-olds. And so I guess that's where my hesitation is. Where I agree with a lot of the parents. I agree with what I'm hearing from a lot of the families that I talk to. Understand that I talk with families on the daily. And I'm hearing from a wide variety, Black, white, Latino. I'm hearing from a wide variety of families, and all of them are saying the same things, or at least in my social network, that they're not comfortable being forced to put this vaccine, into their kids. It was one thing when they had to do it. They don't like the fact that I'm going to lose my job if I don't get this vaccine. So they're willing to risk it for themselves, but they're not willing to risk it for their kids in that regard. And so I believe it needs to be an option. We need to provide families with the option, and then allow those younger kids. I'm talking about these younger kids, allow them to make that decision for themselves as to what's going to be the best fit for their family, because we don't know the family makeup of what those students are going back into. And so that's just where I sit with it. I'm not really for forcing the 12-year-olds to get the vaccine.
Thank you. It's not a forcing, though. It would be a vaccine mandate.
We're saying that you cannot come to school. You cannot be in a PPS building. You cannot come to a PPS game. You cannot do anything PPS related unless you have this vaccine.
Do you have any thoughts about the option C, which is 16 years of age and older to be fully vaccinated, or any thoughts about the extracurricular, like requiring it for music or sports, where there's a higher chance of transmission?
I honestly, when I look at it from like a sports perspective, I don't know how they're going to do it anyway, because just thinking about running up, and I haven't even been back to the gym because I can't think about getting on a treadmill and have to wear a face mask at the same time, because I know that I'm going to die because I can't breathe. And so I'm getting fat, and it's on me because I refuse to go back to the gym and put the mask on. But that's what I'm doing. And so I don't know how they do this. Do I have a weigh in on it? I also recognize that kids running up and down the floor, especially like playing basketball, well, they're still touching the same ball. They still got to play defense on one another. They still got to be up close in one another. Football is the same thing. They may be outside, but they're tackling one another. They're grabbing one another. They're breathing on one another. All that stuff is still happening. And yes, they're outside. I mean, the only sport that outside from a mask perspective, where it really doesn't really make sense for you to have to wear a mask, as I see it, is track, unless they're doing the relay. Because if they're doing a relay, they're going to run right up to the person, they're going to touch them, and then they're going to do all that. So I don't see how it. Yeah, I'm torn. I'm all over the place with it, because I also recognize, and I've been vaccinated, and I believe that the vaccines work, and I believe that they are slowing transmission. I also believe that masks are slowing down transmission. And I believe that us washing our hands more is slowing down transmission. I believe the fact that that we're using more hand sanitizer than we've ever used in any time that I'm aware of is slowing down transmission. I believe that all these things work. I just don't believe that one isolated event such as is going to, I'm not sold on our kids getting it. I'm just not sold on the 12-year-olds getting it.
So, Chair DePass, do you mind if I go next?
Go ahead, Director Scott. Thank you.
Thank you. No, and thanks, Director Green, for those comments. I think I'm going to take a little bit of the other side of this. I mean, I hear what's being said, and I've heard from community about don't force our kids to do this. But of course, we do require kids to get vaccines, and we have for decades. And so I think the question about whether we can or should require children to get vaccines is actually a settled question, because we do. And you don't get to come to school if your child's not vaccinated. And that requirement drives a whole bunch of vaccinations. And we see that among kids who maybe miss those early vaccinations at 2, 3, or 4. All of a sudden they get registered for kindergarten and they say, oh yeah, okay, right, we're gonna have to get our kids vaccinated. The argument that I've heard is, oh, but those other vaccines, have been around a long time, and so we know they're safe, and there's questions about COVID. The only thing I'm going to say about that is none of us are public health people. The FDA and the CDC, along with a whole bunch of other organizations, has said this vaccine is safe, is absolutely safe for kids, and that's the process it went through. It was first approved for adults, now it's approved for kids 12 and up. It's going to be approved very soon for kids 5 to 11. And I'll tell you, I'm an institutionalist, and I think we need to trust the institutions that actually have the authority and responsibility for making these decisions. And I get a little troubled by people who second guess that just because of something like, well, I don't know if it's safe. They've told us it is. They've reviewed the evidence. And I think we have to at a certain point trust it. I'm going to go back to what I said at the very beginning of this conversation, which is that our job is to look at the cost benefit. And if doing a vaccine mandate ends up in more children getting vaccinated, that's going to be better off for the kids, their families, and the community. If, on the other hand, requiring kids to get vaccinated ends up with us not getting many more kids vaccinated and excluding kids, well, that's a failed policy, right? And I said that at the beginning, and I would say that today. It's why I'll be frank. I mean, I did have sort of an open question the last few weeks about whether that cost benefit, where it came down. What's convinced me is that we have seen evidence that mandates are working. And we know that mandates work for adults, and we see that in the workplace. We know, as I was saying earlier, mandates for other types of vaccines work for kids. And I'm confident that if we were to impose a vaccine mandate, it is going to have a positive impact in terms of increasing the number of our children who are vaccinated. Because I think there are a lot of families that just haven't done it because they haven't had to. It's not a philosophical exemption or anything else. They just haven't gotten around to it. Finally, I'm just going to say, I mean, vaccines are what's going to end this pandemic. And I don't mean end COVID, because I want to be really clear. Like I don't agree with the whole, sort of zero COVID idea. We're beyond that point. It's here. But the reality is that I can't remember if it's still the same numbers, but 90% of the hospitalizations are unvaccinated, 10% are vaccinated. Breakthrough cases are happening, but the reality is that almost every breakthrough case results in a relatively mild, or at least not a serious hospitalization or death. Of course, you can point to some examples where it does, but in the vast majority of cases, it doesn't. And so when we think about how we as a society move on, it is by getting that vaccination rate up to 80, 85, 90%. And the only way we're going to do that is by getting our kids vaccinated as well as our adults. And that's where I come back to thinking that I do think mandates are going to have a positive impact. And the final thing I'm going to say, which is a little more philosophical, we hear a lot, and I know you all heard it, very directly earlier about rights and individual rights. And I think it's really important that we also focus on community rights, right? Individuals have a right. And what we're not forcing anyone to get a shot. What we're saying is that if you decide not to get a shot, you might lose your job. If you decide not to get your kid a shot, then your kid may not be able to go to school with other people. That's a decision you can make, and it has consequences. And the reason for that is because community rights are also important. And we as a community, we have a right to be able to come together and expect public health, be able to move beyond this pandemic. And I think this is a role that we can play as a board and as a district that takes us one step further in that. The other thing I'll say is we're not alone in this. I mean, the mandates, there's a federal mandate coming on jobs. Most of local employers are instituting these mandates, and we're seeing these mandates on, in school districts as well. So it's not like we are out in front. We're actually kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of considering this.
Thank you, Director Scott.
I just say some, Chair. So this is of course, a big issue, and I'm listening to what Director Green and Director Scott is saying, and a couple of things that is on my mind. One, from Director Scott, coming from a viewpoint of institutionalizing and being okay with government mandated things. He's coming from a different lens. That lens is not rooted in historical misgivings that have plagued minority communities. So I can see how he would feel safe with that, because historically that's where he's coming from. A couple of things I wanted to make sure I understood is that transmission vaccine does not prevent transmission. It really just prevents the symptoms that you're having. So from my understanding, if we're talking about transmission, then I don't know if the vaccine is the issue as far as preventing transmission versus if someone gets it and you have the milder symptoms. Other thing I'm thinking about too is that we're 3 months in already without a mandate. How have our numbers, are they going up? Are we having breakouts at schools more? So it's kind of like, where are we at now? And are we on the trend that we need to do a mandate as well? I'm hearing from a lot of parents as well, and I'm on the fence as well as far as, this is something that should be a parent decision or is a public health issue. If this was something, like far as the mask, I know that helped prevent transmission. I get that as a public health issue. Vaccine, not so much because it's not preventable for transmission. Washing the hands, again, transmission issue. Vaccine, not so much a transmission issue. So those kind of things, and full disclosure, me and my family are all vaccinated. And I believe vaccines do help. Coming from historically, I'm just taking a chance because I don't know if what the government is producing, because when you look at CDC websites, one is under an emergency use, and they even said as well that, they don't know what the long-term effects are. We haven't had it enough to know what the long-term effects are, and that's on the CDC website. So to say that it's safe right now, it might be safe right now because we don't know what effects it's going to have later. And also I have a question, and I would want to know what is the financial impact if we do mandate a vaccine. What do we have to do as a district financially that is going to affect if we do a vaccine? Does that mean we have to have online school? We still have an obligation to educate our kids. So the obligation doesn't go away because kids don't get vaccinated. So it's not an issue of they can't send their kids to school to get educated. We have an obligation, our tax dollars pay for it, whether we have kids in the district or going to school or not going to school. So I don't think it's so much of an issue as is a parent's decision to send their kids to school if they get vaccinated or not, because we still have an obligation to do that. So what does that cost to us if we do mandate it? And if there is a financial impact, are those funds that we have to use to do that, are they going to, if they're going to hurt our job of providing academic instructions to our students? Because that's our job. It doesn't matter. If we're not educating our kids, it's not going to matter about COVID, it's not going to matter about anything. The goal is to be educating our kids, and we got to make sure we're sticking with that mission of educating our kids. Whether they get a vaccine or not, we have to make sure we're educating our kids. I'm still up in the air about that as well. Because when I'm listening to certain, when we had the listening sessions, we had a lot of people who don't. But then I did an unofficial poll on Facebook, and it was overwhelmingly yes, right? So, I just try to look at, where we're at as far as with all the information that we're getting. And I do want to say that I know everybody, whatever side you're on, everybody's goal is to do what's best for our kids, and that's what I do appreciate. And so with that in mind, I think, whatever decision that we make is going to, in our hearts and everything, is going to be what's going to be best for our kids. That's where I'm at.
Chief Garcia, to Director Holland's point, what do we know about the state of vaccination of our high school kids now, and the trend?
I don't have that answer in front of me, but I definitely will get that. I know, as directors know, we did solicit that information from families earlier in the year. So I just need to pull up the most updated numbers. It is in the analysis that was shared with you in September. But again, I'll just
Yeah.
make sure to get the updated information. And
So
in
we
ter-
we don't know anything about trends because we don't have another data point.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what I could tell you from Multnomah County, you know, over 3 and 4 kids between 12 and 16 or 18 are fully vaccinated. So three and four, according to Multnomah County data.
I'm happy to go next. Sorry, I don't know if someone in the room is trying to talk.
Dr. Lowry.
So for me, I am going to be a yes on requiring for 12 and over vaccine mandate. And I would not want religious and philosophical exemptions. And the reason for me on this goes back to something that Dr. Vines, who's a Multnomah County public health person, said at our last sort of work session on this issue. And she said, you know, if you do this vaccine, like you have to decide what it is your goal is. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And is the vaccine mandate the right tool to get you there? And so for me, my goal for our students in PPS is to have full 5 days of school. We've talked about learning loss tonight. We've talked about teacher burnout. We've talked about student mental health. We've talked about unpredictability of schedules on families. I know on other nights we've talked about what does it mean when a student is quarantined or excluded for COVID protocols. The vaccine mandate does reduce transmission. It doesn't come, you know, we know that there are breakthrough cases, but we do know that the vaccine does help reduce the rates of transmission. We also know that students who are vaccinated have to quarantine less when there is an exposure. So if a student right now, you know, we're not the public health officials, we're not the experts, the county is. And when someone is exposed, they have to quarantine for longer if they're unvaccinated. So for me, if my goal is to keep kids in school as much as possible, vaccinating kids is a way to do that, to reduce the quarantine burden. It also reduces the spread of infection, which also keeps kids in school longer. And I was really moved by some of what Danny Cage has said and other students have said about what it's like to be in school. And in those spaces, what our teachers have said, and that feeling of, I mean, I know the anxiety I felt tonight when I was in this big room with so many people unmasked. And so I can't imagine what that anxiety is like for our students and our teachers every day to be in spaces with people who are masked, but who may or may not be vaccinated. And so I think this would provide, I don't know that it's a false sense of security, but at least a sense of less anxiety. I would also like to just say a huge thank you to our security services tonight. And to all those who responded calmly. And this is a very divisive, difficult issue. And I know there's a lot of passion. I hear what Directors Green and Hollins have said about historic mistrust. I know that there's a lot of political pieces to this, identity around freedom and wanting to have say in certain things. But for me, it really has to be, what is my goal as a school board member on this issue, which is kids in school full 5 days a week as much as possible. And I do believe that this is a tool that will help us to do that. So that's where I am tonight.
Thank you for your comments. Who hasn't? State Representative Weinberg, do you have any thoughts? Not do you have any thoughts? Would you like to share the thoughts you do have?
Sure, I'll share some of them.
I appreciate that distinction.
So, I know he has thoughts.
Yeah, the district student council actually discussed this for about probably half of our meeting. We had quite a bit of other agenda items, but we did definitely focus on this for a majority of the topic. And I can say that unanimously, we all supported option B, to have 12 years of age and older to be fully vaccinated. I think where we were struggling to find synergy, I guess, is around exemptions. And also, if people are applying for exemptions, how do we accommodate those exemptions in schools? So we definitely did talk about having religious and philosophical exemptions with having asymptomatic testing weekly and possibly excluding those students who are unvaccinated from high-risk extracurricular activities such as assemblies or sporting events, as just a way to make sure that we are staying safe. I think kind of like the tension point was trying not to exclude students. And in that sense, we were wondering, like, I'm just gonna go through our process of thinking, okay? Like, I don't totally agree like with where we came to, or like how we got there, but I'm just gonna go with it. So we kind of like discussed, if we don't want to push students out, if like a student isn't getting vaccinated, could we automatically enroll them in the asymptomatic testing, which we are having an opt-in program for right now. But could we require them to be asymptomatic tested? And if they aren't doing that weekly testing, we give them 2 different options to fully attend school, then start talking about excluding students. We also then were like, well, then what's the point of having exemptions then? And will this mandate even be successful in improving vaccinations when those who aren't vaccinated just won't and just go into asymptomatic testing? So while we like the idea of keeping students in school with asymptomatic testing, we don't think it would successfully like implement the vaccine mandate of trying to get a higher level of vaccination status among students. So not like a total final decision, but just like a thought process that we took.
Jackson, most of the student comment that I've heard, and both directly and from email received, is very much in favor. And also, as Director Lowry said, just, you know, these students talking about being in these crowded spaces, it's not always possible, and just a lot of fear there. But I'm curious, through the DSC process or just your own wanderings, are you hearing from students that are strongly opposed? Because I really haven't heard that at all from students.
I would say there were a few students at the town hall that were opposed. I would even go strongly opposed.
Yeah.
I think a majority of students would support it. I think we saw that with the walkout.
Yeah.
There were quite a few students who did walk out. We heard their public comment on one student who did so. I think what we need to keep in mind is like we're talking about parents not wanting to like get their students vaccinated, but not talking about the students who want to get vaccinated with parents saying
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I agree that we had proms and stuff this last weekend, just talking with a lot of high schoolers. And it's interesting that their perspective on this was one, they feel the parents are making a bigger deal out of this than they are.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, we don't care if we have to get vaccinated or not. That's kind of that thought process. Well, I'm talking about maybe like 20, 25 high schoolers last week.
It's not so political.
Not at all.
Yeah,
Not at all.
interesting. Thank you for your thoughts. What about Director Brim Edwards?
So I guess I want to just like also start by acknowledging what happened tonight, and I just want to say that like I salute the actual bravery of the staff, my board colleagues, and the parents and students who were here tonight. In my view, it's like really cowardly and bullying to create an unsafe environment in which people, prevented people from sharing their point of view about a topic that's really important to people in our community, and creating and at the same time creating a public health hazard at our meeting. So just from a broad philosophical standpoint, I support vaccines. They're safe, effective, they improve community health outcomes. I'm a daughter of a public health nurse, so like it's just in my DNA that vaccines have a lot of positive health impacts for the individuals who receive them and also the broader community. When I look at the matrix here of the potential, I guess I feel like there's maybe some language missing from one of the options, because I would be more supportive of a requirement when they're fully authorized versus just emergency authorization. And I don't see that as.
So that would be option C.
Pending full approval.
No, it just says fully vaccinated. It doesn't say fully approved.
Under full FDA approval.
Well, I think that option was put there because 16 and over is fully approved.
Oh, okay, well, I guess I would say I could get to a requirement that says at the point in time, 12 or up, if it's fully approved, that you could implement a requirement. And I also think there's some important, from my perspective, some important work that needs to happen before we approve a requirement, even if it's after full approval. Because look, I'd like to see the implementation plan that's referenced before I set a requirement. And I'd like to see kind of what kind of education plan we would have in place. I'm just, you know, for those who are hesitant, I would want to know, like, what are our strategies for removing barriers? I mean, there are a whole variety, but like, first of all, like, what's our assessment of what they are and how we're gonna remove them versus like starting with the requirement.
And Director Brenmer, can you just clarify what you mean by barriers?
To getting vaccinated.
Well, barriers to getting vaccinated, access, I mean, the whole host of things, like, you know, are we gonna, where are we gonna set them up? I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why people don't get vaccinated. And, you know, at least most of the data I've seen is that, especially for youth, that building that trust and the support for having kids vaccinated is coming from like a trusted healthcare provider. And that, you know, how that will work, I think it's different from our conversations about having a requirement for adults. So I want to see kind of how we're thinking about that versus moving right to the requirement. Because I do think we can share the positive benefits to not only the individual students, but also to the broader community. That I think that wins the day. But I don't think we're there yet. And then, you know, looking at the, you know, small amount of data we have about the staff requirement, that there was, just looking at the disaggregated racial data, that I think that also should be looked at closely of, you know, what were the reasons why people chose to give up their job versus getting vaccinated, and some disproportionalities. So those are things I'd want to know. I, you know, would be supportive of medical and religious exemptions as we do for other vaccines. I don't know that this is, you know, would be different. So I think instead of creating a separate process, that seems like it's better to have a coherent process that's the same for any other of our vaccines. And then the last thing I would say is, I was looking through the materials and there's an Oregon Health Authority process, and they have a panel of experts, which I'm not an expert. So I would want to also like be informed a little bit about where they are in their process, what's their timeline, what the convergence of, you know, our process and theirs would be. I mean, like I say, definitely supporting vaccines. I think the implementation is going to be super important, and I do support similar to what California is doing, which is after it's been fully approved, if it's going to be a requirement.
So basically, the 12 to 15-year-olds not
Right, it's
mandated because it's already been approved for 16.
Right. I mean, there's all kinds of, every day there's like announcements about, but like from the the vaccine companies. And so, I mean, I do think that's like an important point. For me, like I say, it doesn't mean we can't go out and encourage people to get them, have an implementation plan, educate everybody. And it seems like it's around the corner, but I would wait for that piece before I would you can set the requirement, but just I would peg it for after, the marker after the, full FDA approval occurs.
So just to clarify, so just to make sure, so you would not, so option C, which is.
It's off the screen.
Oh, sorry. So option C is 16 years of age and older to be fully vaccinated. And that option, is it me?
No,
Yeah,
it's me. Sorry.
I'm good with that, but I do think, I'd like to see what our implementation plan is, what our education, what sort of, how we're gonna do removal of barriers. And I just think that is, you wanna win people's like hearts and minds versus it be, I think for the vast majority of people, we want people to feel comfortable, like they're doing the right thing for their students.
I would support option C. I would also probably support option B. We heard from our health panel that they didn't see an appreciable difference in the safety. In their estimation, there wasn't a difference in the safety from the emergency authorization to the full authorization. And we also know that full authorization from 12 to 16 is imminent. So I would likely support that, but and I really appreciate that staff, responded urgently and quickly to the request to bring this issue forward for our consideration. I think it's not something that we should lag on. I think it has important benefits for our students. I agree with Director Brim-Edwards that I have a couple questions around implementation that I would like to have answered before we vote, or maybe we have a ramp up. Maybe it's we vote and then we have a ramp up to our when the mandate takes effect. But in particular, more details on what our exclusion policies would be and what our exemption policies would be. I don't know. I'd be interested to know how many students we have excluded now, students who are not fully vaccinated, who do not have the necessary exemptions. And what do? Do they, prior to any virtual option, do they just leave the district? I really haven't seen that. So it seems that those who had strong convictions or reasons not to be vaccinated would take advantage of the exclusions, and then what's of the exemptions, and then what's our policy for those students around testing? That's what I want to see, to Jackson's point, because you don't know how many students that may be in a given community. It makes a difference. So those are just the necessary caveats that y'all have thought through anyway, but we need to see the details on that, I think. And as Director Scott said, this is just an important step in getting us past this moment where we can, as a community, just all feel much more protected.
Absolutely. And I appreciate directors' desire to see an implementation plan. I will say that I think part of what I'm hoping to hear today is a little bit of a narrowing down. So, there's a number of options with each very robust implementation plan. So in order for us to do our effective role to support you in seeing that, I would love to kind of just hear a little bit more of like narrowing, if there is a narrowing down, or if there's not, that's fine. I also want to just acknowledge, that we have proposed a November 2nd vote, and I just want to make sure I'm not, and so depending on the conversation today, so I definitely want to make sure that I'm listening to the board and hearing an implementation plan and taking notes of all the other things that you asked, which we'll be happy to get to you. I'll sit with my team tomorrow to get a sense of what that turnaround will look like. So you can have that information. But again, the implementation plan in particular, I would say, any way that you can help narrow it down to options as a collective board will help staff in really laying out that plan.
Well, because pragmatically speaking, those materials would be due in 2 days from now. guess that's next week. We have an unusual 2 meetings in a row. I mean, we could consider pushing that to the 9th so that we don't have this logjam.
Or we could, is the November 2nd deadline, is that self-imposed?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just to move the
we-
conversation forward. So if the
Yeah.
board decides that November 2nd is too early for you collectively to make a decision, that's your decision. So I will defer to the board and
Yeah.
how it wants to engage in this conversation or what's next.
Yeah, and I think I'm the only one that hasn't voiced my opinion, and I want to say I'm also very supportive of a mandate, and I come from a background very skeptical of the medical establishment for very good reasons in some cases. Southerners, herbalists, you know, if you're sick, you know, you drink water. Anyway, I also feel very strongly like what Director Scott said, and that's about as a community, we need to, we're not going to get over the COVID. We're not going to get over it, but we can get through the pandemic if we have a higher rate of people that are vaccinated. If we get that herd immunity rate of 80, 85, 90%, this virus is going to keep mutating. You know, we're in Delta now, and we're in Delta Plus now, actually, in some parts of the world, and this is going to keep replicating. It's going to keep looking, the virus will keep looking for hosts, and those hosts can be live in our children. I think when I look at prior to the pandemic, I would say, you know, I don't want my kids playing in the freeway, but if you want your kids to play in the freeway, have at it. I feel really differently about this. I feel morally obligated to put this in place to protect not just my kid, but to prevent our kids, the community's kids, the community as a whole. We've also seen, you know, tremendous disruption. We are not back to normal. School was not just open the doors, open the windows, put the air purifiers in. It's been a tremendous strain in every parts of our system to open the doors this year. If everybody in our system was vaccinated and healthy, it would be just like any other year. And this is not like any other year. And it's not going to be anywhere close to that unless we can get to the immunity levels that we need to. I have a couple questions, and I'm concerned about, you know, what the financial impact is for implementation, or if our community health partners are going to be helping with that logistics, financial impact. I'm curious about what our strategy is to bring families along if they are hesitant. And I would strongly suggest, you know, we have partners in place, but I would suggest that we really rethink about not just those partners, but other trusted community health agencies. I'm interested if we've modeled or have the ability to model what happens if. You know how you can do that in Excel? What if and if then scenario? Do we have a way to find out what it looks like, you know, in terms of participation rates? What does that do to our system? And I'm also somewhat worried about the exclusion from learning and wondering what are our steps for educating those who maybe for medical reasons cannot be vaccinated, or do we make that decision based on the percentage of people that opt in and get vaccinated? Like Director Lowry, I'm not for a religious or philosophical exemptions. Oregon's one of the least religious states in the country. And I believe has the most religious exemptions. I think it's an inverse relationship. So I would be not in support of. I would be in support of a medical exemption, but not a philosophical or religious. I also want to just state, I was one of those parents that was also somewhat, you know, I was late to get my kids vaccinated. I was very, you know, older mom. I was very conservative around what I put in their bodies, and yet this is different. This is affecting our entire community.
I have a quick question. So, say for instance, I'm looking at both sides, We do the vaccine mandate, right? What is our goal? Are we still gonna have protocols? We still gonna have all the protocols that we have now, right? We're still gonna have masks. We're still gonna have all the stuff that we're doing now. So the point of the vaccine is for what? Because, and I just read the CDC website, to Director Lowry's position, and it literally states as far as what the vaccine does, and it still states that it's not a cure for transmission. They still talk about masks and hand washing. It's really for to prevent from COVID-19 vaccination, help protect people from getting sick or severely ill with COVID-19. And it goes on to say, as far as to prevent the spreading, is still masks. So I'm just curious, if we do mandate it, what changes?
Well, it's, again, I
As
think
far as
it's,
our school.
the goal is to reduce the risk of dying or being severely sickened.
But now when we talk with the health experts and we talked about the kids' immunization, our immune system, they said their immune systems are a lot better than adults. So, and kids are not dying from getting COVID.
Are they transmitting though?
But once again, the vaccine doesn't prevent transmission.
So I want to jump in here because I want to make sure we're being really clear. As Director Hollins, to your point, the CDC does actually, there is a growing body of evidence suggesting that COVID-19 vaccines reduce transmission. They don't eliminate. And I think that's what you're seeing is you're seeing careful language from the CDC saying getting vaccinated doesn't eliminate your chance of transmission. It is reducing that chance of transmission. And our public health advisors told us that in the session as well. So I want to make sure we're being really clear.
I'm on the website now and I don't see that. So you have to let me know where that's at.
Yeah.
All right, I'll send you the site.
We're collecting this information, and just so everybody knows, and this is provided to you on a weekly basis from our public health experts. I don't know exactly what date this was from, but a study from Sweden, from
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, study from Sweden finds immunized families members greatly reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission within families, with degree of protection increasing with more members vaccinated or recovered from infection. With one family member immunized, the other family members had a 45 to 61% lower risk of contracting COVID-19. And in families with 4 immunized, the risk reduction raises to 97%. And we have a link to the study. So that was shared with directors 2 weeks ago, but I will make sure that it's circulated again as part of some of the next steps here.
And I think, wasn't it our health advisory panel that said that because the viral load that you're carrying is, if you do get it, even though you're vaccinated, your viral load is so much lower that the risk of that's what drives the decreased risk of transmission. So, I mean, looking at things pragmatically from my point of view, I think it sounds like we have a majority of the board that wants to have a vote for sure. And it sounds like we need more information than is realistic to expect staff to provide in 2 days.
Yes.
That will enable us to make that informed decision. So it seems like we need to huddle up after this meeting and figure out, do we postpone that meeting next week, which is, it's unusual for us to have meetings 2 weeks in a row anyway, or do we, figure out when is the right time for the conversation? But it seems unlikely to me. I mean, for me personally, I doubt that I'm gonna have the information that I need to feel comfortable with this vote by next Tuesday in terms of implementation, exemptions, excluded policies, all that. So we have some mechanical things to address before.
Yeah, I'm just say, as not a health expert or health professional, I'm gonna want to feel comfortable if I'm voting to require something of our students, that's, they're health related, that we have enough information that we can speak to our our decision and how it's gonna be implemented, because that is gonna be like, the minute there's a requirement, people go right to like, how's it gonna be implemented? And I think that's gonna be really important, that we're all gonna be like well-informed ambassadors for the decision and the benefits of it and how we're gonna make it accessible. And I think that makes it way more successful than if we make a hurried decision and we're not able to share, how it's gonna be rolled out.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Director Bremerowitz. I also just want to make sure that directors provides clarity to staff on what that is, because if not, this conversation we can end up in circles, right? And so I just want to make sure, at what point do you feel confident enough to make a decision as a collective board? Because what I don't want to get into, again, you can scour the internet for 1,000 things, and I want to make sure that I have a really clear scope from directors. So again, even what I'm hearing based on this conversation is, to Chair Zappa's point, I think what I've gathered is that there is a majority interest to move forward with a continued conversation around requirement for vaccinations. What I'm hearing is that we're looking at potentially option B. I have not heard anybody really articulate an option A or an option. Well, I've heard a few folks with their option D. So I think we're really between option B and option D is what I'm gathering based on the feedback that I've taken. Please correct me if I'm wrong, directors, because this is, again, your choice and your vote and your decision. So I just want to make sure that I'm listening correctly, because if the case is that we're looking really at option B and D, then I have my marching orders to really think about, what is that implementation plan? And to Director Constam's point, it's going to take us more than 2 days to come up with all that information. And so I would kindly ask the directors to extend or delay the vote from November 2nd until potentially the next meeting, which will give us I think more time to have that information.
To be considered, to be intentional. So we have a hold on our calendars for November 9th, but I'm gonna recommend that we hold off.
There's 2 topics already scheduled.
For the 9th.
Executive sessions. No, an executive session, no, actually. A special meeting and a work session on the participants.
Just gonna. Oh, okay, on the 9th or the 2nd?
The 9th. On
the 9th, okay. So our next opportunity to have a vote, to place a vote on the calendar would be on November 16th. Does that give you enough time, a little bit of breathing room to be intentional about responding to what you've heard from the directors and move forward with those 2 options that I have down also written, mostly option B and a couple of Ds, or 1 D.
Yeah, so it's either status quo, or which is no vaccine requirement, or vaccine requirement 12 and up. So
yes.
So I'm 12 and up with the asterisk when it's full. We can vote on it earlier, but I'm not supportive of the requirement until it's fully.
Yeah, I think that's fine, but from an implementation standpoint, that helps me being able to think about. Yes. And then in terms of a resolution, that's where the nuances of the board can really happen.
Yes, yes.
So November 16th, I think, is reasonable. Chair to pass, I will have to have a chance to connect with my team tomorrow morning, just to make sure that, based on what we all collectively heard, we have enough time and energy to make sure that you have what you need as a collective board. So we'll take that into consideration and share with board leadership tomorrow. If November 16th.
I'm sorry. Jonathan, have we looked into, or do we plan to look into, what is going to be our plan should, because I think we all heard very clearly, at least in my listening session, that should we decide to move forward with a forced mandate, that people were going to pull their kids from school. So are we comfortable with that loss? Are we comfortable saying, hey, if you pull them, you pull them. That's on you. Have we considered how many kids get pulled before we say, wait a minute, this is too much? And then realistically, because I'm a realistic individual, and this ain't about politics, this is about math. We're not trying to get full consensus. We're trying to get 4. So let's just be honest about what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to get 4 people that will say yes or no. That's what this all boils down to. This is not about everybody agreeing. This is not about everybody being on the same page. This is about the power of 4. It's simple. If 4 people say yes, we're doing it. If 4 people say no, we're not. So with all of that, have we taken into consideration what that impact is going to be? Should families decide that, well, if this is the route that you take, yes or no, I'm pulling my kids. And then how many kids being pulled from our school system is too many, or is it acceptable loss for the greater good of what we're trying to get done?
Director Green, I'm not an elected board member, so that is your choice and your decision and to weigh. So I would, I don't think that we have any way to forecast. I mean, I'll talk to my team about, how many people would pull their kids. I mean, what I can tell you now is, again, based on polling, 70% of folks agree that, that schools in Oregon should require vaccinations here in the Portland area. So we know that 3 and 4 kids are already vaccinated against COVID-19 in Monoma County. And so that is just my assessment. But again, that question about weight is really a question for directors to really wrestle with.
I want to also speak to something you said. I Director Green, agree with you. One of the reasons I asked if we had the ability to model different scenarios was to take into consideration, what if, 30% of the kids, that's more than the 25% that aren't vaccinated, turn tail and leave the district. But I also want to comment that on the listening sessions were capped at participation and really rewarded people that were speedy to apply to RSVP and get a link. And so we heard very loudly from people on those in those listening sessions that were anti-mandate for multiple reasons. But again, who we heard from rewarded people that were ready to sign up right away.
Zealous.
They were zealous, passionate, maybe some might say, and also threatened to take their kids out, suggesting a level of a privilege to be able to have the choice just to say, if you do this, I'm pulling my child. I heard that multiple times in the listening session I was in. It really was quite startling. But again, the folks that showed up en masse were rewarded for reacting very quickly to the invite, and it wasn't a representative sample of our community who, when polled, 70% were in favor. Heard from the student, district student council of students, and the student that testified, Ms. Stewart, this evening, that overwhelmingly speak to kids wanting to be safe. So I'm listening.
I sort of want to play this other side. There's another side to this, right? So we say that we're looking at everything through the lens of equity. Who was not represented in those calls? When we go back through our calls, when we pan through the people that spoke, when we pan through the people that had a voice, who was not there, right? And so if we go back through, how many people of color, families of color were all represented in those calls? If we go back and we say, well, let's look at it because from the DSC perspective, the student perspective, who's not in that DSC? You know what I'm saying? I'm a vaccinated person. I do believe that we need to get the vaccination, but we also are here to be, there are other families that we're representing, not just me, not just my opinion, not just what I think. It's not about, I love Andrew. Andrew is my guy. You know what I'm saying? We can go to dinner and we can do all of that. But the institution also thought that racism was okay. The institution also thought for long periods of time, that, you know what I'm saying, slavery. I mean, it's all these different things. I don't want to go slavery. Yes, we always go back to slavery. Everybody always goes back. The first thing we do is always slavery. But it was, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't slavery, but it was publicly accepted that Black people can't drink from this water fountain, use this restroom. They can't go into this store. They can't sit at that counter. But it was and I only bring that up not to talk about those things, but to point out that it was an institution that believed that those things were okay. So simply because an institution says something is okay, doesn't make it okay. And then every now and then it takes people to say, no, I disagree. We need to do something different. And therefore, I'm going to fight for that, whether you like it or not, before people start saying, oh, maybe it wasn't okay. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case here, but I am telling you that how many medications have people taken that we found out that it's also causing people to have stages of cancer. We didn't know that when we were doing it, but now all of a sudden, some years later, we're figuring out that, oh, it does that. Again, I want us to make a decision not based on like what everybody else is saying, but let's just be honest about this stuff. There are reasons why people don't want to do this, and it's okay for them to have those reasons. We have to acknowledge that. If we don't, and just simply try to roll over these people as if what they're saying isn't important, as if what they're saying doesn't matter, like, then we're the ones in the wrong. We're supposed to be here to represent all students. And some of those parents, some of those kids that don't want this, they don't show up to these meetings. I sit in the board meeting after meeting after meeting, and very few times do I see a large number of Black families. You know who I see? A lot of white women and a lot of, you know what I'm saying, white men. But how many Black families, Native families, how many Latino families do we see? Those are the voices that we said that we were going to look at everything through our equity lens, and I'm not seeing it. And so that's all I'm saying. We need to take that into account. We need to start looking at that from that perspective. And we need to start, if we're not doing it already, we need to start saying, okay, so how is this going to impact our families of color? Should we decide to make them do this? And some of them are doing it simply because they just like, you know what? Well, I can't afford, like Michelle was saying, I can't afford to pull my kids home. So you got to get this vaccine because you can't stay here all day. So you got to do this so that you can go there because I don't have a choice. We're literally creating a system that further exacerbates the issue that they already have, taking away choice, because they can't afford daycare. They can't afford to pull their kids from school and do homeschooling. They can't afford it. So I'm just saying, before we just start jumping out there, and again, whether you agree or disagree, at the end of the day, all we're trying to get to is 4 one way or another. Yeah. We just got to get comfortable with that 4 and say, when I wake up in the morning, do I still feel good about what I did? So whatever.
Director Green, I mean, it's really good points. And I guess I want to take the other side as well, because we do need to apply a racial equity framework. And I think we all are trying to do that. And it's complicated, right? There is no black or white answer when it comes to applying a framework and figuring out the answer. The reality is COVID has hit Black and brown families harder. So when I think about an equity lens, I absolutely think about those kids, right, that may not get vaccinated and what's going to happen to them. I also think about the community, and I think about the disproportionate death and illness that has hit those communities. And I think about the benefit that could potentially come from a mandate benefiting those communities more. I'd be really curious, and I don't know if you have it at your fingertips, Jonathan, but do we have the crosstabs off that DHM poll by any chance? Because, you know, the poll shows 70% support in Multnomah County. I would be very interested in seeing the crosstabs and looking at Black, Latino families and sort of seeing, you know, what is their support overall? Because I think when we look, I mean, I'm going to be really blunt. When we do public engagement, we hear from the people who show up. And Director Green, I agree with you 1,000% that like the people who show up are not representative of the community. A poll, on the other hand, if it's done well, should be much more representative than what we hear from a listening session or what we get from email or even what we get from our independent conversations, which is not to say any of those things are unimportant. They're very important, but it's good to truth check that, right? So I'm curious if I guess what I'm asking is, would your mind change if you found out that 55-60% of Black families in Multnomah County are in support of a mandate? That's an important perspective when we are applying a racial equity framework. Would you agree?
We did have our first.
If I found that out,
I'm gonna share that.
I'd be game, because we're talking about those families. And then I don't know who said it. I'm still in this quote. I didn't make this up, so I'm not this smart. But it says, anything that we do for you without you, we do to you. And so if people of color aren't at the table, and so polls, all these things, they're great. I agree, the polls, those can be good, but they're only as good as the sample that they come from. So if we put it out and we say, well, we put it out there, but Black people or people of color didn't respond. So ask again. We need to figure out how we can get a response from you versus just simply saying, well, we gave you a chance to say something and you didn't say anything, so therefore we're going to make this decision. Well, anything that we do for you without you, we do to you. And because that's what we've just done, we said, well, we know what you need, so this is what we're going to do for you, and we're going to make this decision for you. I'm totally against that. If I'm a representative of the people, I'm not here because my voice is the one that needs to be heard. I'm here because I'm going to always speak up for the people that aren't speaking for themselves. And I don't know where y'all have been. I don't know what kids y'all have talked to. And maybe it's because I talk to gutter babies. I don't know. Maybe it's because I talk to, you know what I'm saying, to this different group of people. And that's why I'm getting a different response, because the people that I'm talking to, young and old, are telling me they don't want nobody forcing them to do anything.
I want to share that I was on a call with school board partners a couple of weeks ago with LA Unified, because LA Unified put a vaccine mandate in place. That's a district of 600,000 students. And I don't know if you've been to LA lately, but there's a lot of folks of color, a lot.
And in Oakland.
And so those are places where, I don't know the degree of its success, but they are in place. And
yeah, Chair DePass, and if I may, Director Green, I appreciate many of your comments. I will say that, as directors know, we do have a racial equity and social justice lens worksheet, if you will, or a set of questions that really help, that can help directors really wrestle through those questions. So I appreciate your desire to really funnel this conversation through a racial equity lens. And as Director Scott alluded to, there are many paths towards realizing that. And I think part of the critical exercise that one does when you go through that lens and go through those series of questions, it really exposes and brings forward, many of those conversations and questions, Director Green, that you lifted up. So what I'll do is also include the racial equity and social justice lens work document that can, for the board to really spend time individually and potentially collectively to walk through that. And then I just want to clarify, so Director Scott, I will look to see if I can get those crosstabs from DHM. And to be clear, PPS did not commission this poll. This was an independent poll that we saw and wanted to use as another data point in your collective decision. So I just want to, but again, I will reach out to those folks to see what other information I can get that has a lot more, that hopefully has details to that poll.
Yeah, and I kind of want to speak to that too. When we talk about the racial equity lens, it's good that we have it on paper and we have it, those little cards and stuff that we have. But one of the things that I was really disappointed with was how the inequities that I've seen when we did the listening sessions. So on one day, we had 3 meetings with our English-speaking parents in the evening, and we had three different type of sessions. But then when it came to with our Spanish-speaking parents, we had one in the morning, and we had 2 parents, and one of the parents actually came to the English-speaking parent one too. So we actually had 1 parent. And so we tried to go back, and from what they were saying at that meeting was the way that it was set up as far as outreach. It wasn't, and then I guess we did it on Saturday, and I still don't know how many parents we had on Saturday. But I think, we might want to look at how do we re-engage those, the minority groups to kind of get their sense of get their opinion and their thoughts on that as well. Like I said, I don't know what happened on Saturday. I don't know if it was a great turnout on Saturday or what.
Sure, and I can address the issue of why there was an event on Wednesday, I believe Thursday or on a Wednesday on a morning. Historically, when we make decisions on when to have events, we talk to a number of staff. So in our conversations across the organization and understanding when is the best time, there was an indication from staff that an early morning meeting works, because in many school communities, that is around the time when parents are dropping off their schools. This is not folks that are working, obviously. These are folks that are stay-at-home parents. And so this was one avenue. I know I can tell you now that folks like the migrant education program meets in the mornings, right? So so that's one example. Did we fall short? Did we not get enough people to speak on that day? Absolutely. And staff aggressively worked to bring forward a Saturday session that brought about 15 individuals. Now, if I'm hearing from directors that you need more engagement to hear from other voices, I'm happy to engage our staff to figure out what those look like. But again, I want to be clear that at what point is engagement, at what point have you heard all that needs to be said about the folks that are in support or against, and ultimately you as elected board members will have to make that decision. So I'm happy to engage and bring forward additional community engagement sessions if that is so what you wish to desire. But I will also, I know Jackson, you also mentioned that we hosted one event, and I would turn to the DSC. You all are at across our schools, and students, and you can promote. And so if the DSC desires to engage in listening sessions, I'm happy to see if staff and how can staff support. So really, this is your decision as directors, and I really need to be guided in terms of what information you need and how much information you need. But again, I want to be clear that at what point does that become a circular, redundant conversation? And I just want to note that for you.
I'm gonna do a time check for us because it's getting late. We started late. I'm very mindful of keeping staff later than they need to be here. I'm just going to suggest about the engagement. I appreciate that you said, could have been better. It always can be better. If it were me and I was the queen for the day, I would have probably looked to do culturally specific focus groups and offered an incentive for participation, just because best practice is to get people in a room that don't normally come to public meetings. That's how it can be done, to provide a safe, masked, incentivized opportunity. I've done it before in my current job, just with a $50 gift card to Fred Meyer. We know in certain communities, if they're working in dim sum restaurants, for instance, if they're not at work, they're not getting paid. So it's a token of their appreciation and a recognition that we pay professionals a lot of money, and when we're seeking out the opinions of people that don't participate, we should pay them as well. I'm going to cut us off right here so we can move along to our very final topic of the day, and that's the appointment of the Community Budget Review committee members. Oh, yes.
Chair, I don't know what direction we're going in right now. What are we?
Okay, thank you.
Them to do?
That's a great question. Do you feel like you have enough information from us to move forward to bring
I think so. So what I heard is
for November 16th, November 16th vote.
Correct. Yeah. So I heard that there will not be a discussion on November 2nd or a vote on November 2nd. However, now we're potentially looking at a November 16th discussion, potentially vote. What I also heard is at least 10 types of requests. And so again, I will take all of what we heard today and unpack that with our team tomorrow morning and follow up via email and communicate kind of what those next steps are. And I want to make sure that as I share with you what I heard and the items requested, I'm going to just ask directors to be intentional about reviewing and making sure that I have all that is needed. Because again, what I also heard tonight is that additional listening sessions are possibly, and I would have, it would be great to know, expectations in terms of if your desire as directors is to see numbers of people, that's one thing. If you want to see deep, rich conversations, that's another strategy. So I really want to hear, is it about numbers and getting numbers of people in a room to, or is it about meaningful, time to unpack what you're hearing from families in a small gathering. So again, I think it's important to get clarity from directors on what it is that you need. But I think we have enough. Yeah. I have enough to take back to our staff, and we'll report back.
Okay, and I'm kind of waffling on whether we do an additional engagement because I'm looking at the calendar and wondering how we could do that.
I think at the very least we should do like Jackson said, they feel that they do have enough representation for our students. So if this is who we're doing this for, at the very least, we should have another engagement for our students.
Yeah, we're going forward with the survey, so I already drafted it and already sent to the rest of the DSC. And I think we might go forward with some listening sessions, but again, it depends on the DSC. I mean, we're all volunteering our own time, right? As well.
What are our thoughts? So you're going to be sort of you're handling getting additional information from students. Mm-hmm. Do we have an idea on additional culturally specific the five safe harbor language? I was going to say, I feel like I have enough information in terms of the engagements and what I've seen on the internet, on social media rather. And the DHM poll and hearing seeing the written comments from families, I think it would be great to hear from culturally specific groups that don't attend our meetings. Pardon me? Somali American community, Native American community, African American community, Vietnamese. You could go down the line, there's 9 safe harbor languages. I think that I'm looking at the calendar, it seems like a really tight fit, but I think if we could hear from a few of those groups, it might be good.
I think we've already requested a lot, but
Go ahead.
I'd like to see what is the impact if we don't go forward. So specifically, we already know if you're not vaccinated, you're having to go into isolation for 10 days versus if you want to be kind of what is that impact of who is having to take those 10 days and how many students are experiencing those 10 days of absence.
That intersects with another question that is increasingly topical around test to stay, and whether we can get the necessary testing supplies from the state to implement test to stay, because we're doing a disservice to our students by having the asymptomatic quarantining now, in my opinion. But we need to make sure that we're able to implement test to stay, but those two things come together there.
I'm gonna, Jonathan, do you feel, Chief Garcia, do you feel prepared and
yes, thank you.
Supported and going?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. We're gonna address our final topic, and that would be the appointment of the Community Budget Review Committee members and student representatives. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this next item?
Yes, switching topics, Chair to pass. Just to review, the Community Budget Review Committee, affectionately known as the CBRC, is there to review, evaluate, make recommendations to the board regarding proposed budgets, other budgetary issues identified by the CBRC or the board. The members of this committee are appointed by the school board after an application and interview process. And I think we have here this evening at this hour still our Chief Financial Officer, Norberto Delgadillo, to provide his recommendations for new CBRC members. Do we have Chief Delgadillo available? There he is. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Are you okay? So it sounds like y'all able to hear me. Yes, excellent. So have the report in front of you, and to kind of provide a quick summary, as Superintendent Guerrero was just sharing, that each year the Board of Education appoints a community budget review committee to assist in the budget process. And it's comprised of community members, some students, and once the budget season kicks off, they routinely meet about once a month. And the selection committee considered a variety of different factors in assessing and the applicants. We had a total of 4 applicants. 2 of those were students, and the members who reviewed the committee members who reviewed the applications and selected the members were Director Hollins, Dr. Laurie, School Board Student Representative Jackson Weinberg, Community Engagement Specialist Maria Hernandez, and Confidential Executive Assistant Jordan Cooper. And they all participated in selecting the process, or selecting the CBRC members. And so, in summary, we're recommending the passage of the board resolution to appoint a new community budget review committee to appoint the new community budget review committee members: Huen Poole, Hop Waters, Joseph Anderson, and Roger Kirchner. I did speak through that, but I also welcome Director Hollins, Dr. Laurie, if they wish to share any additional insight or thoughts on the process, as we really did defer this process to more less about the CFO office, more from engaging board and staff engaging with community members.
Maybe you want to share some insights about the process?
I wanted to thank Jordan, the staff member in the finance office, for coordinating everything and scheduling everything and getting us all the questions and basically herding the cats to make this happen. And so really appreciate the work from your office, Norberto, to Chief Delgadillo on this. And I'm really excited about the new members on CBRC. I think they're going to be great assets to that group.
And I know, I'm sorry, go ahead, Director Hollins.
I agree with Director Lowry. Jonathan was awesome. Jordan, right?
Jonathan, you're awesome too.
Yeah, he was great at organizing everything, looking at a good evaluation tool that we had to interview the applicants. And I think we got a great group of applicants. I think they range with experience, with youth, with demographics. And they seem like they're eager to get in and really learn, what this is. So I'm excited about the group, and that's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
So I know we have several other positions open. Would we consider candidates on a rolling basis, or how does that work?
Well, we have 8 now, and I think that's the minimum, right?
That's correct. That is the minimum. And I don't know the answer to that question, Dr. Consent. If we've done that before, if that's a possibility to continue to add, we do have room for about another 4. It was we did have a difficult time recruiting, and we extended the deadline twice. And through that, for obvious reasons, there's still a lot going on during this time of year and contending with the COVID. And so, I think that we can definitely explore that and see if there's interest. If folks reach out, we can definitely take that into consideration. But also, it comes down to time as well, and see, thinking of committee who interviewed and take into account their time to come together and go through the process again. So it may be a matter of balancing and trying to figure out how all of that can fit together.
And we're on eve of our budget season, so y'all have other work to do.
Yeah.
Including
Does the 8 members include the 2 students as well?
Yes.
I was just curious, and I couldn't see from the materials if we got the types of these or the kind of, holes we were looking to fill with these appointments.
I did not participate in the interview process. So I think that in seeking representation of the community, I know that was a big goal. The feedback I got from Jordan and team was that the committee felt that they received that, particularly considering the limited number of applicants. But of course, I welcome Dr. Lori, Dr. Holland to add additional insight.
Yeah, I'm also really excited to see 2 students who aren't part of the DSC participate this year in the CBRC, engaging more students and having that also pull more students into DSC conversations is always exciting.
That's great. Well, do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6390, appointment of Community Budget Review Committee members and student representatives?
So moved.
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves and Director Holland seconds adoption of Resolution 6390. Is there any additional board discussion? And Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
The board will now vote on Resolution 6390, appointment of Community Budget Review Committee members and student representatives. Excuse me. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? Resolution 6390 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Weinberg unofficially voting
yes.
I want to thank our new CBRC members for their service.
Hey. Thank you. Congratulations, new CBRC members. And I think we're done with our business at this time. Do we have any additional business before we adjourn? The next meeting of the board will be held on November 2nd. That's a week from tonight at 6 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.